Am I the asshole for telling my sister the father of my child is none of her business? I, 30F, have always had a close relationship with my sister, 26F. Growing up, our parents weren't the most supportive, and we witnessed how bad relationships with siblings can impact a family. Because of that, we made a pact to always stay close and support each other. However, my sister has a tendency to give her opinion on things that don't concern her. Worse, she sometimes creates unnecessary drama based on misunderstandings or assumptions. For instance, back when she was in high school, she somehow got it into her head that I had developed a drug addiction. It wasn't true, but it caused significant stress and unnecessary drama in our family. Now, the issue at hand. I got pregnant at 18 and had my daughter, who is now 11. She's an amazing kid and the light of my life. Her father, however, has never been involved. When I told him I was pregnant, he insisted I get an abortion. I made it clear that I was keeping the baby and told him he didn't need to be involved if he didn't want to. He chose not to, and I've respected that decision ever since. I've been able to support myself and my daughter without his help, and I have a family that's always been there for us. Recently, my sister has decided that my daughter is missing out by not having a father in her life. She's been pushing me to tell my daughter who her father is and to go after him for child support. I've explained repeatedly that my daughter isn't interested in meeting him, I don't need his financial help, and I have no desire to force a relationship where one isn't wanted. Despite this, my sister has continued to bring it up, acting as though she knows what's best for my family better than I do. Yesterday, things came to a head. My sister crossed a major line by calling my daughter directly and pressuring her to say she wanted a relationship with her dad. This made my daughter extremely uncomfortable and upset. When I found out, I snapped. I called my sister and told her, in no uncertain terms, that she needed to drop the subject immediately. I told her that the situation with my daughter's father is absolutely none of her business, and if she couldn't respect that boundary, I would go no contact until she apologized. Not just to me, but to my daughter as well. About an hour later, her husband called me, saying I'd made her cry. He argued that she was only trying to help and wanted to make sure my daughter had the best life possible. I told him that while I understand her intentions, her actions were out of line. The second my daughter expressed discomfort, it became my responsibility as her parent to shut this down, regardless of whether it hurt my sister's feelings. So, am I the asshole? I feel that my role as a mother is to protect my daughter's well-being, and that includes shielding her from unnecessary stress or discomfort. My sister may have been trying to help, but she overstepped a boundary, and her behavior made my daughter uncomfortable. I believe I was right to put my foot down and set a clear boundary. Am I the asshole for inviting our oldest daughter to Christmas Eve dinner with the stipulation that her cheating boyfriend can't join? I'm a 56-year-old mother with 3 children, Kate, 30F, Sam, 28M, and Mary, 26F. My husband and I have always hosted family gatherings for the holidays, and for the past 3 years, Kate's boyfriend, James, has been part of those celebrations. He's always come across as polite, kind, and mature. They seemed very happy together, and over the years, Kate shared how well they communicated, never fought, and were even discussing marriage. About 7 months ago, Kate told me James had her ring finger measured at a jewelry store, and she was over the moon with excitement. Naturally, so were we. Unfortunately, 4 months ago, I learned through a friend's daughter that James was having an online affair. It was devastating to hear, and we immediately informed Kate. She confronted James, and according to her, he broke down, confessed everything, and provided full disclosure. He took responsibility, expressed deep regret, and even started individual counseling. Kate decided to stay with him and work on their relationship. She says he's been going above and beyond for her ever since, giving her undivided attention, attending therapy, and actively trying to rebuild trust. She told me that he acknowledges the hurt he's caused and that it'll take time to repair things. James even reached out to my husband and me to apologize. He was emotional and seemed genuinely remorseful. Despite this, my husband and I have strong feelings about what happened. We can't look past his actions so soon, especially with the hurt he caused Kate. With Christmas Eve dinner approaching, we decided to invite Kate but made it clear that James would not be welcome this year. The rest of the family, Sam, his girlfriend, Mary, and her husband, agreed with our decision. When I told Kate, she seemed very upset. She explained that the last 2 months have been positive for their relationship, with romantic getaways, therapy, and rebuilding trust. She said James knows it will take a long time for things to get back to normal and has been fully committed to the process. Kate told me that by not inviting James, it feels like her family isn't willing to give him the second chance she has. She also expressed feeling like a third wheel among all the couples attending and said it would make her uncomfortable to come alone. She believes excluding him sends a message that her family isn't supportive of her choice to try and repair their relationship. Now I'm conflicted. I understand that Kate wants to move forward with James, but as her parents, it's hard for us to forgive him so soon. At the same time, I don't want to alienate Kate or make her feel unsupported. I've spoken to the rest of the family, and they all feel that James shouldn't be included this year, but I can't shake the feeling that I may be making things harder for Kate by drawing this line. So, am I the asshole for sticking to my decision not to invite James, even though it's upsetting my daughter? Am I the asshole for not telling my father-in-law that my dad was getting our daughter a suitcase? I, 29M, and my wife, 29F, are preparing for a road trip to visit my grandparents. Our 4-year-old daughter didn't have her own suitcase, so back in August, she spotted a Minnie Mouse suitcase she really liked. My dad, her grandpa, offered to get it for her as a gift for the trip. He didn't get around to ordering it until just a few days ago, but when it arrived, our daughter was thrilled and couldn't wait to show it off. While on a FaceTime call with my in-laws, our daughter excitedly showed them her new suitcase. A few hours later, my father-in-law texted my wife saying, "We are very sad that you do not tell us or other grandpa that we was getting daughter a suitcase for her trip. We are not giving her the suitcase as she does not need to. We are sad about the outcome." This came as a surprise to both of us because they never mentioned that they were planning to get her a suitcase. Similarly, my dad hadn't told me he'd actually ordered the suitcase until just a couple of days ago. There was no overlap or communication about the gift plans on either side. Now, my in-laws are upset, but I don't feel like this was something we could have anticipated. We didn't deliberately choose one grandparent over the other. It was simply a matter of not knowing both sets of grandparents had the same idea. So, am I the asshole for not telling my father-in-law that my dad was getting our daughter a suitcase? I didn't intentionally keep them in the dark, and I had no idea they were planning to get her one. This feels like an unfortunate miscommunication rather than an intentional slight. Am I the asshole for calling for a welfare check on my neighbor's dogs? My neighbors recently left for vacation, leaving their 3 dogs in cages in a screened room. After 2 or 3 days of constant barking, I started to get concerned. I was preoccupied with a roof leak and work being done on my house, so I didn't immediately act, but the barking didn't stop. I eventually knocked on their door to check on the situation, but no one answered. I reached out to another neighbor to see if they had noticed anything. They confirmed the barking but didn't have any more information. I then contacted the landlord of the property, who told me the tenants were out of town but assured me that someone was supposed to be checking on the dogs. However, I'd been home all day due to the roofing work and hadn't seen anyone stop by. While it was possible they came when I wasn't looking, I knew that these neighbors had a history of neglecting their pets. For example, they'd left the dogs in the garage during the summer, something I'd reported to the landlord before. After 10 hours of continuous barking and seeing no sign of care, I decided to call animal control for a welfare check. When they arrived, they found that the dogs had no food, water, or bowls in their cages. The dogs were taken into custody. When the landlord found out, he told me to stay out of the matter in the future. I told him it was too late and that I couldn't ignore what I saw. He reiterated that I should avoid getting involved next time, but I felt I did the right thing for the well-being of the animals. So, am I the asshole for stepping in and calling animal control? I was genuinely concerned for the dog's welfare, and I couldn't ignore what seemed like neglect, but I now feel conflicted because of the backlash from the landlord. Am I the asshole for refusing to lend my mom money for her surgery after she called me selfish? Your mom is going through a tough time with her health, and needing surgery is understandably stressful. You've made it clear that while you care about her, Lending her the full amount for the surgery isn't financially feasible for you without jeopardizing your own financial stability and goals. You even offered to contribute a portion of the cost if she explored other avenues like insurance or loans to cover the rest. However, your mom reacted emotionally, accusing you of being selfish and not caring about her. She brought up the sacrifices she made for you when you were younger, seemingly expecting that you should now sacrifice in return. Her frustration and fear about the situation are understandable, but her reaction was hurtful and dismissive of the effort you've already put into supporting her. Your position is reasonable. Helping your mom doesn't have to mean putting yourself in a precarious financial position, and offering partial support while encouraging her to look into additional resources shows you care without compromising your own future. It's also important to remember that financial health is a form of self-care and stability, which allows you to be there for your family in the long run. You're not the asshole here. You're setting boundaries that protect your financial well-being while still trying to help your mom in a way that works for both of you. Her accusations, while likely born out of fear and frustration, aren't fair or justified. Am I the asshole for telling my sister she can't bring her kids to my wedding, even though she's threatening to ruin it if I don't let them come? Weddings bring out the best and the wildest in people. Your desire for a small, child-free wedding is perfectly reasonable, especially since it's your wedding, your rules. You set the boundary clearly from the start, and your sister initially agreed. But now she's backtracking, using guilt trips, emotional manipulation, and outright threats to get her way. That's not okay. Her argument about not finding a sitter might seem valid on the surface, but considering the timeline, you're still 6 months out. There's plenty of time to figure something out. This isn't a last-minute situation where she's scrambling for options. It feels less like a logistical problem and more like a control issue. She's prioritizing her wants over your very clear boundary. The threats to make a scene or show up uninvited with the kids cross the line from family drama to outright sabotage. That's not respecting you as a sister, a bride, or a person who's trying to celebrate a major milestone in her life. It's manipulative and it's unfair. Your mom's siding with your sister is another layer of frustration, but you're not responsible for managing everyone else's feelings. Your mom may think this is a miscommunication, but it's not. You communicated your expectations clearly. Your sister just doesn't want to respect them. You're not the asshole here. You're allowed to have the wedding you want, and your sister doesn't get to hijack it because she refuses to respect your boundaries. Her decision to escalate things to the point of family-wide drama, passive-aggressive social media posts, and threats of a public scene says more about her than it does about you. Stick to your guns. If she doesn't want to come without her kids, that's her decision, not yours. You've done nothing wrong by maintaining a reasonable boundary and prioritizing what you want for your special day. Am I the asshole for not wanting to visit my husband's family for every holiday? You're not the asshole here. Wanting to spend a holiday at home, especially after making the effort to visit your husband's family for Thanksgiving, is entirely reasonable. Marriage is about compromise, and it's unfair for your husband to expect you to prioritize his family for every holiday while disregarding your needs and desires. You've communicated your preference to stay home for Christmas, especially since your brother flew in to spend time with you and will be there until after the holidays. That's a valid reason to want to stay put. It's your turn to host and enjoy time with your side of the family. Additionally, you've offered a compromise by suggesting you visit his family for New Year's instead, which shows you're trying to meet him halfway. His reaction, however, saying, "I guess this will just be a miserable *****ng Christmas then," and accusing you of not meeting his expectations for marriage, is unfair and hurtful. It dismisses the effort you've already made to spend time with his family, like going for Thanksgiving, and puts all the blame on you for not wanting to drop everything and drive. 6 hours again. The fact that he views your choice as a personal slight rather than a reasonable boundary is troubling. It's also valid for you to feel jealous or resentful if you perceive that his family always takes priority. The fact that he's willing to move mountains for them but resists when you ask for something is a serious issue. Your needs and preferences should carry equal weight in the marriage. You're not asking too much to spend Christmas at home, especially when you've already visited his family for Thanksgiving. Wanting to establish your own traditions and have quality time with your brother is reasonable and doesn't mean you don't care about his family. His frustration may stem from pressure from his relatives, but it's unfair for him to take it out on you and accuse you of ruining the holiday. Marriage is about balance and partnership. If he's unwilling to compromise and puts all the responsibility on you to maintain relationships with his family, that's something worth addressing through deeper communication, possibly with a counselor if needed. You're not the asshole here. You're simply asking for balance, respect, and a fair share of holiday traditions. Am I the asshole for telling a stranger to learn some manners? Hi, this is my first time posting on Reddit. I've seen posts from this subreddit on TikTok and wanted to give it a try, so I hope my formatting and story are okay. Earlier today, I, 19F, went to Sephora to shop for Christmas gifts. It's a large Sephora in a busy American city, so the store was pretty crowded. I was swatching some blushes, trying to find the perfect shade for my sister, and made sure to stand close to the shelf to give others plenty of room to walk past. While I was focused on the products, I suddenly felt someone standing very close behind me. So close that they were literally touching me. Then, they reached right in front of my face to grab a product without saying a word. I'm originally from Australia. My family moved to the US a few years ago. And where I'm from, it's considered quite rude to invade someone's personal space like that. I turned around to give the person a look, thinking it would be enough for them to realize they were too close and maybe step back. Instead, the girl, who looked around my age or a little older, gave me a nasty look right back before taking a small step away. I thought that was the end of it, but apparently not. A minute later, she did the exact same thing, standing so close that her stomach was literally touching my back. I was really uncomfortable at this point, so I turned to her and said, "Excuse me, personal space." I made an effort to say it in a polite tone, thinking she would apologize or at least step away. Instead, she rolled her eyes and snapped back, "Calm down," in a rude tone. Then, she turned to her friend and started mocking me in what I assume was meant to be a British accent. I guess Australian and British accents sound the same to some people? As if that weren't enough, she and her friend started speaking in another language, interspersed with more mocking comments in English. I could still hear her, so I responded, "I can hear you mocking me. Maybe learn some manners? Just say, 'Excuse me,' next time." This seemed to escalate things even more. They continued to mock me, but honestly, at that point, I just found it ridiculous because I'm not even British. I decided it wasn't worth my energy and walked away to another section of the store. When I told my mom about it later, she suggested I could have been nicer or just ignored the situation altogether. She pointed out that the store was crowded, and maybe I had unintentionally been blocking part of the shelf, which might have frustrated the other girl. I started second-guessing myself. Maybe I should have moved and avoided engaging with her, even though I was annoyed by her behavior. I also wondered if it could have been a cultural difference. They were speaking a mix of English and another language, so perhaps they were tourists and didn't realize how their actions came across. I'm not American myself, so I understand that people from different places have varying ideas of personal space and etiquette. At the same time, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect someone to say, "Excuse me," if they need to reach for something, especially when they're invading someone's personal space. Was I wrong to say something? Am I the asshole here? Am I the asshole for telling a stranger to learn some manners? Hi, this is my first time posting on Reddit. I've seen posts from this subreddit on TikTok and wanted to give it a try, so I hope my formatting and story are okay. Earlier today, I, 19F, went to Sephora to shop for Christmas gifts. It's a large Sephora in a busy American city, so the store was pretty crowded. I was swatching some blushes, trying to find the perfect shade for my sister, and made sure to stand close to the shelf to give others plenty of room to walk past. While I was focused on the products, I suddenly felt someone standing very close behind me, so close that they were literally touching me. Then, they reached right in front of my face to grab a product without saying a word. I'm originally from Australia. My family moved to the US a few years ago. And where I'm from, it's considered quite rude to invade someone's personal space like that. I turned around to give the person a look, thinking it would be enough for them to realize they were too close and maybe step back. Instead, the girl, who looked around my age or a little older, gave me a nasty look right back before taking a small step away. I thought that was the end of it, but apparently not. A minute later, she did the exact same thing, standing so close that her stomach was literally touching my back. I was really uncomfortable at this point, so I turned to her and said, "Excuse me, personal space." I made an effort to say it in a polite tone, thinking she would apologize or at least step away. Instead, she rolled her eyes and snapped back, "Calm down," in a rude tone. Then, she turned to her friend and started mocking me in what I assume was meant to be a British accent. I guess Australian and British accents sound the same to some people? As if that weren't enough, she and her friend started speaking in another language, interspersed with more mocking comments in English. I could still hear her, so I responded, "I can hear you mocking me. Maybe learn some manners? Just say, 'Excuse me,' next time." This seemed to escalate things even more. They continued to mock me, but honestly, at that point, I just found it ridiculous because I'm not even British. I decided it wasn't worth my energy and walked away to another section of the store. When I told my mom about it later, she suggested I could have been nicer or just ignored the situation altogether. She pointed out that the store was crowded, and maybe I had unintentionally been blocking part of the shelf, which might have frustrated the other girl. I started second-guessing myself. Maybe I should have moved and avoided engaging with her, even though I was annoyed by her behavior. I also wondered if it could have been a cultural difference. They were speaking a mix of English and another language, so perhaps they were tourists and didn't realize how their actions came across. I'm not American myself, so I understand that people from different places have varying ideas of personal space and etiquette. At the same time, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect someone to say, "Excuse me," if they need to reach for something, especially when they're invading someone's personal space. Was I wrong to say something? Am I the asshole here? Am I the asshole for taking my kids to a show when my husband was sick? This morning, my husband was upset because I took our kids to a holiday show with my parents while he was sick at home. He called it cruel and mean, saying that he would never leave me in the same situation. Now I'm questioning whether I made the wrong choice. Here's the situation. We had tickets to a kids' holiday show that we had planned with my parents. The show was a special one-day event and lasted about an hour, with some additional time for travel and grabbing a quick bite afterward. My husband started feeling unwell the night before, and I took care of him, making sure he had Gatorade, setting up space heaters for his comfort, giving him medicine, and checking on him regularly throughout the night and morning. When morning came, I asked him how he felt and whether he wanted to attend. He said he would go but was running a fever. I told him it was okay for him to stay home and rest, thinking I was being considerate by not pressuring him to push through. He often gets annoyed if he feels forced to attend events when he's not up for it, so I thought I was offering a no-pressure way out. In the end, I decided to take the kids to the show with my parents while he stayed home to recover. I didn't think it would be a big deal since he'd have some quiet time to rest, and I didn't want the kids to miss out on something they were excited about. When we got back, however, he was clearly upset. He told me that my parents and I were cruel for going without him and accused me of setting a bad example for the kids. He said that we should have stayed home as a family to show solidarity when someone is sick. I apologized to him because I didn't want to escalate things further, but I felt confused about his reaction. In my family, we've always believed that if someone is sick, they rest while everyone else continues with plans, especially if it's something like a one-day event that can't be rescheduled. I thought I was being thoughtful by letting him have the house to himself to recuperate and ensuring the kids didn't miss the show. From his perspective, he feels abandoned. He sees it as a matter of family values, teaching our kids that you stay back together when someone isn't feeling well. He also pointed out that he wouldn't leave me if the roles were reversed. Now I'm torn. Was I really being cruel? Should I have stayed home to show more support, even if it meant disappointing the kids and my parents? Or was it reasonable to think he'd appreciate the space to recover while we enjoyed a short outing? Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for flaunting my money in front of my sister? Hi. I realized I posted this in the wrong subreddit earlier, but here's the situation. Earlier today, I went out with my mom, my sister, and one of my nephews to help my sister with some Christmas shopping. While we were out, my sister asked if I wanted to go ahead and do my grocery shopping, and I agreed. For context, my sister didn't have to buy anything at the grocery store. My mom and I were the only ones planning to spend money. I was driving, so I decided to go to Whole Foods first and then to Lowe's Foods for anything I couldn't find there. When we pulled up at Whole Foods, my sister asked why we weren't just going to Walmart. I shrugged and laughed, saying, "Honestly, I haven't been in a Walmart in years. I just don't really like shopping there." She asked why, so I explained, "I don't know, I just don't like going in there. I feel like other places have better quality." I could tell this made her a little mad, but we moved on and went inside. While we were shopping, I was picking up ingredients for Christmas dinner, and my nephew found some cupcakes he wanted. They were about $13 for a pack of 4. He asked his mom if he could get them, and she responded, "Why don't you go ask your rich-ass auntie who's too bougie for Walmart?" I rolled my eyes and told my nephew I'd buy the cupcakes for him. At that point, my sister got angry and accused me of making her look like a bad mom for not being able to afford them. When we got to the checkout, my total came to about $425, but that included some non-food items that were probably over $100 of the total. I paid using cash my husband had given me earlier that morning. My sister flipped out. She started yelling right there in the store, accusing me of flaunting my money and making fun of her. She said I was acting elitist and thought I was above regular black people. She kept going, and I hurried to finish my transaction while trying to ignore her. After I checked out, my sister stormed out of the store and left in a taxi, leaving my nephew with me and my mom. Since then, I've been getting a flood of texts from her calling me an asshole. She said I was rubbing my financial situation in her face, and she also made comments about how the money wasn't really mine, since I'm a stay-at-home mom and my husband is the one who earns the income. For context, my sister and her husband both work, and while they're not in the same financial position as us, they're not struggling. I admit we are very fortunate. My husband is the breadwinner, and I don't have to work. But was I wrong here? I didn't think I was flaunting anything, but I wonder if I inadvertently hurt her feelings. I even asked my nephew if I had done anything to offend him, and he just laughed and said no. He only wanted the cupcakes. Teenagers. But now I'm really questioning myself. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for asking my friend to pay me back after they borrowed money for a luxury vacation? I, 28F, have been friends with Jess, 30F, for over 5 years, and we've always been close. Recently, Jess hit a rough patch financially and asked me for help. She needed $1,500 to cover some bills, and even though it was a bit of a stretch for me, I agreed to lend her the money. I trusted her and genuinely wanted to support her during a difficult time. We made a plan for her to pay me back in installments over the next few months. 2 weeks later, I was scrolling through social media and saw Jess posting photos from a lavish vacation in Hawaii. She was staying at a fancy resort, enjoying gourmet meals, and going on excursions like snorkeling and ziplining. I was stunned. I didn't know she had plans to go on a trip, let alone one so extravagant. I texted her, asking if she had plans to start paying me back soon because I was struggling financially myself and needed the money. Jess's response caught me off guard. She immediately got defensive, saying that the vacation had been planned months before she borrowed the money and that canceling it would have resulted in significant losses. She accused me of being harsh and overreacting, insisting she would pay me back when she could, but for now, she was enjoying her life and didn't want guilt thrown at her during her vacation. Her attitude left me feeling hurt and frustrated. While I understand that vacations are often planned in advance and can be difficult to cancel, it feels like she's prioritizing luxury over fulfilling a financial obligation to me. $1,500 isn't a small amount, and her "when I can" attitude makes me feel like I'm not being respected as someone who helped her when she was in need. I've been second-guessing myself ever since. On one hand, I don't want to come across as overly harsh or ruin our friendship. I can see how she might feel defensive, especially if she believes the trip wasn't directly tied to the money I lent her. On the other hand, I feel like I'm being taken advantage of, especially when she's showcasing an extravagant vacation while leaving me waiting for repayment. Was I wrong to ask her to pay me back? Or is it reasonable to expect her to prioritize repaying the money she borrowed? Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for being upset that my mom keeps stealing my clothes? My mom, 50F, has this habit of taking my 16F clothes without asking. At first, I tried to brush it off, but it's become a consistent issue, and it's really starting to bother me. The problem isn't just that she's borrowing them. It's that she stretches them out and then denies that they're mine. For context, I'm a size 14, and my mom is a size 24. I love baggy clothes, so I don't mind if something fits a little looser, but when she wears them, they don't just stretch, they lose their shape completely. And to be honest, the clothes often don't look great on her because they're too small for her frame. Every time I call her out, she denies it. She'll say, "Oh, this is my top," or "This is my dress," even though I know it's mine because I bought it, and I recognize my own clothes. It's frustrating because it feels like she's gaslighting me into doubting what belongs to me. Today was the last straw. She was wearing one of my dresses but using it as a top. When I commented on it and told her it was mine, she snapped back and insisted it was hers, then told me to drop it. I just don't understand why she keeps doing this. Part of me wonders if it's a self-esteem issue because she struggles with her body image and might think borrowing my clothes will make her feel better. But at the same time, it's not fair to me, and it's upsetting that she can't even acknowledge what she's doing. I feel bad when I try to confront her because I don't want to hurt her feelings, but she can't keep taking my clothes and ruining them. I feel like I have to walk on eggshells to avoid making her upset or starting an argument. Update asterisk after posting here. I talked to my nan, who lives just around the corner, and we came up with a solution. I'm going to start keeping most of my clothes at her house for now. My mom has a lot of self-esteem issues and can be quite emotional, so I want to find a way to handle this delicately. I'm hoping this temporary fix will give me some space while I figure out how to address the deeper issue without upsetting her. I really appreciate all the support and advice. I don't want to damage my relationship with my mom, but I also need to set boundaries, and it helps to know I'm not overreacting. Am I the asshole for feeling upset about this? Am I the asshole for not forcing my kids to go on vacation with their dad? My husband and I are no longer in a relationship after 11 years together and having 2 kids. The turning point came after an argument where both he and his mom blamed me for something without giving me a chance to explain my side. It happened in front of our kids, and when I stood up for myself, they got mad at me. I wasn't the only one at fault in the situation, but the fallout left our relationship fractured. Our oldest child even took my hand during the argument and said, "It's going to be okay," which broke my heart. Since then, I've made sure to bring the kids to his house so he can't accuse me of keeping them away. However, he changed the locks, and our kids were confused about why they couldn't get inside. It's been frustrating to try to have conversations about custody with him because he either says it's not the right time, refuses to talk outside, or insists on having arguments in front of the kids. I know I'm partly at fault for letting the kids witness these hostile exchanges, and I feel guilty about that. I've tried to maintain some level of civility for the sake of the kids. I spent time with him and his family on Thanksgiving and another event, even though he chose not to attend one of them, opting to go to a friend's get-together instead. His family seemed genuinely happy to see me and the kids, and some even asked where he was. It's clear he can't stand being around me, but I'm still trying to make things work for our children. Recently, he asked if he could take the kids on a trip. I asked if I could go too, thinking it might help ease the tension or at least ensure the kids felt supported. He said no, but I later learned he paid for the rest of his family to go. I told him I'd think about it since the kids already had plans with friends for the weekend. When I asked the kids if they wanted to go on the trip, they said no. I reassured them that it was okay if they did, but they still said no every time I asked. His mom, the one I had the original argument with, has since been on better terms with me. However, she laughed when I explained why the kids weren't going and dismissed their plans, saying, "They have more weekends for sleepovers, so we have to change our plans to make them happy." This irritated me because it felt like she was minimizing their feelings and decisions. I've tried to include their dad in meaningful moments, like our youngest's recent birthday party. Even though people didn't know if he would show up, I planned a separate birthday dinner and invited him, not expecting him to come because of our tension. He did show up, but only because his mom asked him to. Now I'm torn. Should I have forced the kids to go on the trip even though they clearly didn't want to? Was I wrong for letting them make the choice to prioritize their plans with friends instead? Am I the asshole for how I've handled this situation? Am I the asshole for moving out because my mom is charging me rent after high school? I'm 17, neurodivergent, and often question my own decision-making, so I want an outside perspective. My parents are divorced, and my mom has full custody of me. A while ago, my mom and I had a major argument. I had saved up about $2,300 from my job, but I found out she had used it to pay her bills and debts. I only discovered this when I asked to withdraw money for Christmas shopping and she started acting suspicious. Naturally, I was upset, but there wasn't much I could do since she controls the account. Recently, while driving me to my dad's house for an early Christmas celebration, she brought up a new expectation. She told me that once she and my stepdad pay back the money they owe me, I'll need to either attend school or pay bills. Specifically, things like the phone bill. She also said I'd need to help around the house more or get a second job because my current job only brings in about $130 every 2 weeks. The idea of contributing to the household isn't inherently bad, but the way she approached it made me feel more like a burden than a family member. I don't have much in the house aside from my personal belongings, and I often feel out of place there. I look a lot like my dad, and I'm the only one in the household without their last name. It's a small thing, but it makes me feel like an outsider. After this conversation, I spoke to my dad. We both cried, but we came up with a plan. I'll graduate high school early, collect my important documents, and start packing my things over winter break. Once I'm ready, I'll tell my mom I'm moving to live with my dad. Legally, I've had the right to choose where I live since I was 14, but I haven't exercised that option until now. I know this will be hard for my mom to hear, so I plan to tell her after the holidays to avoid ruining our time together. However, I'm preparing for 2 possible reactions. 1. She tries to fight me leaving, in which case I'll wait until I'm 18 and go no contact if she makes it too difficult. 2. She supports my decision and helps me move, and in that case I'll stay in touch and possibly visit her in the future. I don't want to sue her or make her feel like I don't love her anymore, but I feel like I've been taken advantage of, and she's not listening to me. I'm tired of feeling like a cash cow rather than her child. Am I the asshole for deciding to leave? Am I the asshole for refusing to help my brother? I, 33F, am dealing with my brother, 41M, who is in a toxic relationship with his girlfriend, 49F. She has been cheating on him and left him alone during the holidays to be with her lover. Despite all this, he refuses to break up with her and has been an emotional wreck. While I feel bad for him, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. 2 years ago, she did the exact same thing. She kicked him out of his own apartment, and he stayed with me for months. During that time, he was a complete mess. He spent all his time crying on my couch, refusing to take any productive steps to improve his situation, and obsessively trying to get back together with her. He even begged me to contact her on his behalf. It was a nightmare for me. He started drinking heavily and behaving erratically. One night, he left my house drunk in just his socks, and I had to find him in the hospital. I tried everything to help him. I encouraged him to see a therapist, pushed him to go to a psychiatrist, and offered him all the support I could. He refused every single effort I made. That entire experience was so traumatic for me that I'm still dealing with the fallout. I've been on antidepressants for the past 2 years because of the stress he brought into my life. Fast forward to now. My mom and I decided to spend Christmas abroad with my sister to take a break from everything. My brother found out and started begging me to buy him a ticket so he could join us. I told him no, that he's a 40-year-old man and can afford his own ticket. The truth is, I'm dreading him coming because I know it'll just be a repeat of 2 years ago. I can't handle the emotional toll of taking care of him again. I love my brother, but I feel like I've already done everything I could to help him. He refuses to take accountability for his situation or seek the help he needs, and I can't keep sacrificing my own mental health for him. Am I the asshole for refusing to buy him a ticket and not wanting to deal with this again? Am I the asshole for expecting my husband to watch our kids on his birthday? Today is my 35F husband's 39M birthday. and it hasn't been the celebration he might have hoped for. Our kids, 3F and 2F, have been sick all week, and as their primary caregiver, I've been running on fumes. Only 3 to 4 hours of sleep over 48 hours, taking care of them. Unfortunately, I started coming down with the illness myself on Friday while at work, and combined with the lack of sleep, I feel absolutely awful. This is the sickest I've been in years. Last night, I told my husband that I didn't think we'd be able to go out for a birthday dinner as planned. I suggested we order takeout instead, and he said okay. This morning, I managed to get about 6 hours of sleep, a luxury at this point, but I still felt terrible when I woke up. I took some Tylenol, got up just long enough to change and feed the kids, and then helped them sing happy birthday to him with a candle and a cookie. He opened a couple of simple presents, and I explained that I needed to go back to bed to rest. At one point, he came to me and asked me to make breakfast for everyone. I told him I couldn't even get up. I was shivering with chills when the Tylenol wore off and barely had the energy to function even when it was working. Throughout the day, he's been huffing and puffing, clearly upset about having to take care of the kids himself. It feels like he thinks I plan to get sick on his birthday or that I'm exaggerating how terrible I feel. He's been watching the kids but has been obviously irritated, making the day more stressful for me. I feel bad that his birthday isn't going as planned, but I also don't think I'm unreasonable for needing rest when I'm this sick. He's had to step up for one day while I recover, but he's making it clear that he resents it. Am I the asshole for expecting him to take care of the kids on his birthday while I'm sick? Am I the asshole for not giving my sister-in-law the money after I sold a cell phone she gifted me? Last year, I, 19F, broke my phone, and my sister-in-law, 26F, offered me her old one for free. The phone wasn't charging, so she had already replaced it with a new one. She told me I could have it if I was willing to fix it and buy a charger. I agreed, got it repaired, and have been using it since. Recently, I impulsively bought a new phone because my stepdad was selling one, and I couldn't pass up the deal. A friend's mom mentioned she was interested in buying my old phone, and we agreed on what I think is a fair price. I let my SIL know I planned to sell the phone and told her I would give her half of the money once I received it. She thanked me and everything seemed fine. However, my brother, 30M, her husband, sent me an angry message saying I was stealing from them. He argued that because I got the phone for free, I should give all the money from the sale to my SIL. This escalated quickly and now my family is divided. Some, including my mom, stepdad, and other siblings, agree with me that offering half the money was fair. Others, like my dad, think I should give them the full amount to keep the peace, especially because my SIL and brother are struggling parents, and I'm just a 19-year-old with fewer financial responsibilities. To make matters worse, my brother's rude tone in his message has made me less inclined to give them the full amount. I'm now worried I've made Christmas awkward, but I also feel like my initial offer of half the money was more than fair, considering it was a gift, and I spent my own money to repair and use the phone. Am I the asshole for selling the phone and not giving all the money to my SIL? Would I be the asshole for telling my mother she got what she deserved? I, 19M, live with my mom while I'm on break from college. I have my own room at her house, but ever since I first got it, I'm the middle child. My mom has always used it to store the stuff that wouldn't fit in her own room. This has been a consistent problem for years. It makes my room look messy, and I often get blamed for the mess, even though most of it isn't mine. I've tried thinning out my own belongings to make space, but it never seems to help. Another issue is privacy. She regularly barges into my room to grab her things, which makes it feel like the space isn't truly mine. This morning, there was an incident that's making me wonder if I'd be out of line to say something to her. I had a cup of tea in my room that I accidentally left on top of one of her totes, the only flat surface near my bed with any space. While I was out of the room, she came in to grab a smaller tote that was stacked on top of the one with my tea. In the process, she knocked over the cup, spilling tea on some papers and yarn she had in the tote. We left for a Christmas party shortly after, so I didn't notice what had happened. When we got home, I stayed in the living room, but my mom went into my room to put some of her stuff back. That's when she discovered the tea-stained papers and yarn and got upset with me for leaving the cup there in the first place. While I understand it wasn't ideal for me to leave a cup in my room, I feel like the responsibility lies with her since she's the one who knocked it over and keeps putting her stuff in my room to begin with. I want to tell her that she got what she deserved, essentially, that this is the natural consequence of her habit of using my room as a storage space and not respecting my boundaries. However, I'm torn. While I think I'd be justified in pointing this out, I also don't want to escalate things or seem ungrateful for living at home during college. Wibda if I told her she deserved. Would I be the asshole if I told a coworker I hate the nickname he gave me? I, 24 and B, changed my name about 4 years ago, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. My original name never felt right, but my chosen name is something I absolutely love and have cherished since I first heard it at age 11. It's deeply meaningful to me, and I spent over a year deciding on the perfect name before making the change. The name I chose also happens to be part of the Key and Peele skit where the substitute teacher mispronounces names. I genuinely love the skit. It's hilarious, and I don't mind the occasional joke or mispronunciation from friends or coworkers. However, there's one coworker who has taken the joke way too far. He never calls me by my actual name anymore. He exclusively uses the mispronounced version from the skit. I also made the mistake of telling him my chosen nickname, which is spelled differently but happens to appear in the same skit. I think he found it so funny that he now uses that nickname as well and completely ignores my real name. I'm starting to hate hearing the mispronounced version every day, and I worry that his constant joking might ruin my love for my name entirely. I put so much thought into picking this name, it means the world to me, and it's frustrating that someone would disregard it for the sake of a joke. That said, I also don't want to be a bad sport. I don't mind the occasional use of the nickname or joke, but when it's constant, it feels like he doesn't respect me or my identity. I've even started avoiding him because I don't want to deal with hearing it. Edit for clarity asterisk I didn't name myself after the skit. I fell in love with the name years before I even saw it. When he first made the joke, I jokingly mentioned that my middle name also happens to be in the skit, with a different spelling. I didn't expect him to latch onto that and make it his go-to way of addressing me. I don't think he's a bad guy, just unaware that the bit has gone stale and is starting to bother me. He doesn't know how much it affects me because I haven't said anything yet. I'm planning to address kindly and let him know that while I don't mind the nickname occasionally, I prefer to be called by my actual name. Would I be the asshole if I told him to stop? I'm worried about coming across as oversensitive or a buzzkill, but my name means so much to me, and I don't want to grow to hate it. Am I the asshole for telling my best friend that her husband is psychologically abusing her? You 36F told your best friend Mary, 35F, that her husband, 40M, is psychologically abusing her, and now you're questioning whether you overstepped. You and Mary have been best friends for over 15 years, and you've supported each other through life's ups and downs. You leaned on her when you dealt with emotionally abusive relationships in the past, and she turned to you for support during her first divorce when she discovered her ex-husband had cheated on her twice. After her divorce, Mary moved to a new state and started dating online, determined to find the one quickly, as she felt her biological clock ticking. She eventually married a man who initially seemed to meet her standards, but after they tied the knot, she discovered he had lied about his weed use, which was a deal-breaker for her. Now, 2 years into the marriage, Mary is 8 months pregnant and struggling. She works full-time, takes care of farm animals, manages most of the housework and cooking, and is understandably exhausted. She recently confided in you that she's trying to meet her husband's sexual needs, but doesn't have the energy. When she told him she needed to prioritize her own comfort, he became angry and gave her the silent treatment. Hearing this, you told her, "Babe, that sounds like abuse." Mary brushed it off, saying it was more like a toddler throwing a fit. From your perspective, this felt eerily similar to patterns of abuse you've experienced in the past. Concerned, you researched signs of psychological abuse and found an article that supported your feelings. You shared your concerns with Mary because you had promised her after her first divorce that you'd always be honest about your observations, even if they were hard to hear. You're worried because she's pregnant and vulnerable, and you fear the situation might escalate. Thankfully, she has family nearby for support, so she's not entirely isolated. You didn't accuse her husband to be malicious or judgmental. Instead, you came from a place of concern and love. You've been in abusive relationships yourself and recognized troubling patterns in Mary's marriage. Still, you're second-guessing yourself, wondering if it was inappropriate or damaging to bring this up while she's pregnant. Were you wrong to say something? Your intentions were clearly rooted in care for your friend's well-being. You're not the asshole for voicing your concerns about her relationship, especially since you have experience with abuse and are trying to help her recognize potential red flags. At the same time, it's important to tread lightly, as she may not be ready to accept or act on your observations. Approaching the topic with empathy and without judgment is key. You might also let her know you're always there to listen, reinforcing that she has your unconditional support, no matter what she decides to do. Am I the asshole for missing my husband's phone call? Here's what happened. I had gone to the theater with my children, and as usual, I turned my phone on silent to avoid disturbing anyone during the performance. After the show, while on the way home, I spoke to my husband a few times over the phone. During one of these calls, he mentioned that his car might break down and, if that happened, I might need to come and pick him up. I assured him I'd be ready to help if necessary. When I got home, I called him again. He said he'd be home in 2 minutes. At that point, I started heating up his dinner, knowing he would likely be hungry after work. In the middle of this, I completely forgot that my phone was still on silent from earlier in the evening. Unbeknownst to me, during the short 2 minutes he had mentioned, he called me 3 times. I didn't hear the phone ring and missed all of them. When he finally came into the house, he was furious. He stormed in, shouting and swearing, clearly upset. He explained that he had called me because he needed help parking the car in the driveway. We're having some renovation work done on the house, and building materials are stacked on one side of the driveway, making it a tight squeeze to park. Because I didn't answer, he hit his bumper while attempting to park. He blamed me entirely for the situation, saying that if I had picked up the phone, I could have guided him and the accident wouldn't have happened. He demanded that I apologize, claiming it was my fault his car got damaged. I refused to apologize. I pointed out that if he had really needed help, he could have come inside the house to ask me in person instead of relying solely on the phone. This made him even angrier. He insisted that I was in the wrong and that missing his calls was irresponsible. I told him that if he had handled the situation calmly and spoken to me with understanding instead of immediately lashing out, I might have considered apologizing. However, given his reaction, filled with yelling and blame, I was adamant about not apologizing. To me, his overreaction was completely out of proportion to what had happened, and I didn't feel I should be blamed for a mistake that could have been avoided in other ways. Now, he's still upset, and I'm left wondering, am I the asshole for not answering his calls and refusing to apologize for the damage to his car? Am I the asshole for being mad at my boyfriend after he got drunk? Here's the situation. I'm a 19-year-old woman, and I've been dating my boyfriend, who is 20, for 2 years now. English isn't my first language, so I apologize in advance for any mistakes. To make things clear, whenever we go out together, my boyfriend refuses to drink, or at most, he'll have 1 or 2 beers and call it a night. That's totally fine with me. I'm not the type of person who would pressure anyone into drinking. But here's the part that bothers me. He has absolutely no problem drinking heavily when he's with one of our mutual friends, a 27-year-old woman I'll call S. Last night, he didn't reply to my texts, which isn't unusual. I assumed he was busy sleeping, gaming, or just forgot to respond. But when I woke up this morning, I saw a text from him saying, "Sorry babe, I got shit-faced." The message was full of grammatical errors, which is how I could tell he wasn't joking. Here's what frustrates me. When we're together, he acts like drinking isn't really his thing. He keeps it light, maybe a beer or 2, and seems uninterested in getting drunk. Yet when I'm not around, especially when he's with S, he feels comfortable drinking until he's blackout drunk. I also understand that there are times when someone might just not feel like drinking, and that's perfectly fine. But it seems like the days he doesn't feel like it always coincide with the times we're together. This pattern is starting to bother me more and more. What really stung was what happened on New Year's Eve. That night is both our anniversary and a big holiday, and I wanted us to celebrate together. However, he told me he wouldn't be drinking. I was disappointed but respected his choice, thinking maybe he just wasn't in the mood. Meanwhile, he's out on random Saturday nights, getting wasted with S without a second thought. I'm not worried that he's cheating on me with her. That's not the issue. What hurts is that it feels like he can only truly let loose, have fun, and relax when I'm not around. And lately, it seems like that happens most when S is in the picture. I feel like I'm stuck in this weird place where I'm questioning if I'm overreacting. Is it selfish or unreasonable of me to feel upset about this? Does it make me the asshole for being mad? Or is it fair to feel hurt that he seems to have more fun with other people, especially S, than with me? Am I the asshole for not committing to my temp job? Here's what happened. I'm a 17-year-old girl, and over Christmas, I was working a temporary job at a warehouse. The thing is, I never actually signed up for this job myself. My mom applied on my behalf, sent in all my information without telling me, and only informed me the day before I was supposed to start. She also mentioned that if I didn't show full commitment, the owners of the warehouse would think poorly of me. I ended up working 2 14-hour shifts in a row. It was incredibly exhausting, both physically and mentally. I'm not a strong person physically, which is part of why I wouldn't have chosen this type of job for myself. On top of that, I have mental health challenges and struggle significantly in high-stress environments. This warehouse job turned out to be exactly that, stressful. The woman in charge constantly screamed at the temp workers, especially when her instructions weren't clear or when tasks weren't completed as she wanted. After those 2 shifts, I realized I couldn't keep going. I told my mom I wasn't going to show up for the next 2 days. I figured it wouldn't cause any major issues because the warehouse had mentioned they'd overhired temp workers, and I wasn't planning on working there again or interacting with these people in the future. I told my mom about my decision the evening before my next shift. That's when everything blew up. My mom was furious. She told me I had to stick with it because I had committed to the job. When I pointed out that I hadn't committed to anything, I hadn't even applied for the job myself, she started screaming at me, saying things like, "You'll never survive in the real world." It didn't stop there. The next morning, she woke me up at 6 a.m., still yelling. She said she was ashamed of me and accused me of being lazy and irresponsible, adding that I'd never amount to anything. I tried to explain how overwhelming the job was for me and how I genuinely felt I couldn't handle it, but she wasn't interested in listening. What's especially hard for me is that I know, from past experiences with her, that even if I had completed all 4 days, she would have found something else to criticize. It often feels like she doesn't like me much, no matter what I do. I can't understand why she's so upset about this. I'm doing my best to stay on track with my life. I'm preparing for university and applying for jobs I believe I can handle, though there aren't many options in my small town. But this situation has left me questioning myself. Did I handle this wrong? Am I missing some key understanding of why this is such a big deal? Am I the asshole for deciding not to commit to this temporary job, even though I didn't sign up for it in the first place? Am I the asshole for not going to a no-kids wedding that is out of town? Here's the situation. My friend, who I've known since I was 8 years old, is getting married in mid-June. The wedding is about 3 hours away from where I live. Normally, I would love to attend and support her on such an important day. However, there are a few complications. I'm currently pregnant with my second child, a boy, who is due in early April. By the time her wedding rolls around, I'll have a toddler who is 3.5 years old and a newborn who will only be about 2 months old. On top of that, her wedding is a no-kids event. I completely respect her choice. I think child-free weddings are a great idea, and I even wanted one myself at one point, though I ended up not going through with it because so many people wouldn't have been able to attend. That said, I understand and support her decision, and I'm not about to ask for an exception for my kids. The problem is, attending her wedding under these circumstances feels logistically overwhelming. Driving 3 hours with a toddler and a newborn is challenging enough, but there's more to consider. The hotel closest to the venue is $600 a night, a cost that's hard to justify, especially considering my current family and financial situation. While we could stay at a less expensive hotel farther away, that would make things more complicated because I'll be breastfeeding and need to be close to the kids and my husband. Leaving the kids and my husband at home isn't an option either, as breastfeeding is a round-the-clock responsibility with a 2-month-old. I might be able to ask my mom to come help and watch the kids during the ceremony, but that would involve paying for her flight, hotel, and any related expenses. By the time I add everything up, including travel, accommodations, and a wedding gift, we're looking at a cost of $3,000 to $4,000 or more. Additionally, I remember how exhausting it was to care for my firstborn during the early months. My first didn't start sleeping through the night until 12 weeks, and I suspect I'll still be dealing with sleepless nights when this wedding happens. The idea of spending all that money and effort only to attend a short ceremony by myself while my husband stays with the kids feels overwhelming and impractical. I feel incredibly guilty about potentially missing her wedding, though. She came to mine, and I know how much this day means to her. But I also wonder if it's reasonable to expect someone with a newborn and a toddler to make a trip like this for a no-kids event. Would I be an asshole if I sent her a nice gift and a heartfelt note explaining why I can't attend? I want to honor our friendship, but I feel like the logistics of this trip are just too much for me right now. Am I the asshole for telling my friend she needs to stop recycling her exes? Here's the situation. I'm a 23-year-old woman, and my close friend Tina, who is 24, has a long-standing habit of getting back together with her exes. When I say habit, it's like a revolving door of relationships. She'll break up with someone, vent to me and anyone else who will listen about how awful they were, block them everywhere, and swear she's done for good. Then, like clockwork, a few months later, she's back with the same person, acting like everything is magically fixed. Her most recent and most recycled ex is Mark. Tina and Mark have broken up and gotten back together 5 times in the past 2 years. Each time, she says the breakup is final because he's immature, selfish, and unwilling to commit. Then, after some superficial changes, if any, she takes him back. Predictably, nothing improves and they're back to square one. Last weekend, we were out with a group of friends, and Tina dropped the bombshell that she and Mark are officially back together. Again, everyone gave the polite congratulations and tried to act happy for her, but I just couldn't muster the enthusiasm. I stayed quiet, which Tina noticed. Later, she pulled me aside and asked why I wasn't celebrating her reunion with Mark. That's when I told her, "Tina, you need to stop recycling your exes. It's not healthy, and you know it." I didn't yell or say it in a mean way. I just stated my opinion honestly. But Tina got really upset. She accused me of being unsupportive and said a real friend would be happy for her no matter what. I tried to explain that I've supported her through this same cycle 5 times already, and that it's emotionally exhausting to keep pretending this is a good idea when it always ends the same way. Now she's angry with me, and some of our mutual friends think I was too harsh. One of them even told me, "It's her life, not yours. Let her make her own mistakes." I get that point of view, and maybe I was out of line. But I also feel like letting her repeat this pattern without saying anything isn't really helping her either. It feels like enabling behavior, and I care about her too much to keep pretending this is normal or healthy. I love Tina, and I want the best for her. But I also feel like I'm being dragged into her relationship drama over and over. Every breakup brings tears, late-night phone calls, and hours of venting that leave me emotionally drained. Am I really such a bad friend for wanting her to break out of this cycle? So, Reddit, AITA for finally saying something? Should I have just kept my thoughts to myself and let her figure it out on her own? Or was I justified in being honest, even if it upset her? Am I the asshole for inviting my mother to my graduation? Here's the situation. My parents got divorced a little over a year ago, and the tension between them has been pretty high ever since. When my college graduation came around, I naturally wanted both of my parents to be there to celebrate this major milestone in my life. However, my dad made it clear that he wouldn't attend if my mom was invited. This put me in a tough spot because it felt like I was being forced to choose between them. I wrestled with the decision but ultimately decided to invite them both. I figured it was their responsibility as adults to decide how to handle the situation, rather than putting that burden entirely on me. In the end, my mom chose to attend, and my dad didn't. Now, he's upset with me, saying I should have spoken to him about it before inviting her. He feels hurt and left out, and part of me feels guilty because I knew his stance ahead of time. At the same time, I can't help but feel frustrated that he let his personal feelings about my mom take precedence over celebrating my achievement. This was my college graduation, a moment I'd worked so hard for, and it's upsetting that he wasn't willing to set aside his differences with her, even for just one day. I understand that divorce can be complicated and painful, but I didn't feel like it was fair to make me choose. My graduation was about celebrating me, not about their conflict. I wanted both of them there because they're both my parents, and they've both played a role in my life. Now, I'm questioning whether I handled this the right way. Should I have taken my dad's feelings into account more and talked to him first? Or was it reasonable to invite both parents and let them figure out how to navigate the situation? Am I the asshole for not trying to manage this more carefully? Or should my dad have been more understanding about the significance of the event? Am I the asshole for not speaking to my parents after our 5th pet turtle died? Here's the context. My parents have had a habit of bringing home Eastern box turtles since around 2015 to 2016. The first turtle was rescued from a CVS parking lot, which seemed reasonable since it was in potential danger. Over the years, they brought home more turtles, eventually accumulating 5 in total. Unfortunately, every single one of them died, mostly during the winter months when they were poorly prepared for hibernation. The first 3 turtles passed away within a year of each other. Despite this track record, my dad brought home another one, and it also died during hibernation. This dampened their enthusiasm for a while, but earlier this year, my dad brought home yet another turtle. By this point, I was deeply concerned. Our previous turtles had died due to inadequate care, and I was worried this new turtle would meet the same fate. I decided to be proactive and asked a coworker, who owns reptiles and amphibians, for advice. They recommended a UV lamp, access to water, and a diet that includes live bugs like crickets and worms. I shared this information with my parents repeatedly, starting in June. They assured me they'd handle it, but they didn't follow through. Instead, the turtle's diet consisted of store-bought turtle feed and bananas, making fruit half its diet. They never bought a UV lamp, and when winter came, they were completely unprepared for hibernation. When it was time for the turtle to hibernate, they attempted to construct an enclosure, but gave up and let it hibernate in the pantry. Unsurprisingly, the turtle died within a week. What upset me even more was how they handled his death. They left the turtle's body in the pantry, didn't inform me about it, and I found him late at night while grabbing something. I was furious. I stopped talking to them altogether, avoiding their presence. To make matters worse, his body stayed in the pantry for 3 days until I buried him myself. When I did, my mom was upset, saying she wanted us to bury him as a family. A few days later, she asked me if I was ready to apologize. I was stunned. Apologize for what? I felt they owed the turtle and me an apology for their negligence and how they handled his death. Now it's been a week and a half, and with Christmas approaching, I'm conflicted. Part of me feels like I'm overreacting. After all, it's just a turtle, and not everyone sees pets the same way. On the other hand, their disregard for the turtle's well-being and their failure to take responsibility for its death deeply upset me. I also feel like their pattern of neglect is something they refuse to acknowledge, which makes it hard for me to let this go. Am I the asshole for maintaining my silence and waiting for an apology? Or should I let this go for the sake of keeping the peace, especially with the holidays coming up? Am I the asshole for calling my dad a hypocrite over something that happened decades ago? Here's the background. I'm a 23-year-old woman, and my parents, Jeannie, 65, and Stephen, 66, had me relatively late in life. Growing up, I always assumed they hadn't planned to have kids and that I was an unexpected arrival in their 40s. Over the years, I heard a lot of stories about their lives growing up in era during the Troubles. Most of these were lighthearted tales about their teenage antics or their struggles with poverty. Occasionally, after a drink or two, the stories would turn darker, like how difficult it was for my dad, Stephen, to navigate being bisexual in the very Catholic 60s and 70s. When I was 19, my mom, Jeannie, got drunk and told me something she had never shared before. In the mid-1970s, she had been sent to a mother and baby home, abandoned in a foreign village, treated horribly, and ultimately forced to give up her baby to strangers. It was devastating to learn, both because of the pain she endured and because she had kept it hidden for so long. But what angered me even more was that my dad, who was 18 at the time and preparing to go to university, didn't do anything to help her. He could have taken a job to support her or made some effort to prevent the trauma she endured. When I asked her about it, she dismissed my anger, saying it was a terrible time, but being upset about it now wouldn't change anything. Fast forward to recently, my dad came home upset about one of his students. She's in her final year of college, is predicted to get 3 A's, but is refusing to apply to university because she just found out she's pregnant. My dad was frustrated with her situation, saying her family and the boy involved should be supporting her so she can still go to university. He even said that's what he would have done for me if I had been in her position. Something in me snapped. I called him a hypocrite and asked him where all this supportive energy was when my mom needed it back then. He argued that it was a different time and that I was out of line for bringing up Jeannie's past like that. He's been sulking ever since, and refusing to speak to me. My mom said that while I may be right, it wasn't my place to question or accuse Stephen, especially about something from so long ago. Now I'm torn. On one hand, I feel justified because it seems unfair that he would preach about supporting someone in a difficult situation when he didn't do that for my mom. On the other hand, I understand that the past was complicated, and maybe it wasn't my place to call him out so bluntly. Am I the asshole? Would I be the asshole if I didn't plan a party for New Year's? Here's the situation. I'm a 22-year-old woman with the same group of friends I've had since elementary school. Every year for New Year's Eve, we've followed the same tradition, hanging out at someone's house, playing cards at the dining room table while our parents went out. It was fine when we were younger, but now, as an adult, I'm bored with it. Most of our hangouts still follow this dynamic, or they end up gaming together while I sit on the sidelines. I love my friends, but I want to do something more exciting. Last year, I tried to plan a proper NYE party for us, something a bit more lively. However, the responsibility fell entirely on me. They sent me lists of foods and drinks they wanted, expecting me to handle all the prep and hosting, even though the party wasn't at my house. It was overwhelming, and because I had to work on NYE, I couldn't pull it off alone, and the party ended up falling through. This year, I tried to get ahead of the issue by creating a group chat on November 1st. To start planning early and ensure the responsibilities would be shared. I repeatedly asked for input and help but was either ignored or met with excuses, like, "I'm not good at planning. You're so much better at it." It's frustrating because we're all adults, and I shouldn't be the only one expected to manage everything. Now, with just over a week until NYE, one of them messaged the group chat asking what the plans are. I haven't responded because I don't want to end up in the same situation again. Honestly, I'd rather spend NYE doing something fun for myself, dressing up, going out, and actually enjoying the night, instead of hosting a party where I feel underappreciated and ignored while they play video games. That said, I feel guilty because if I don't plan something, nothing will happen. They rely on me to take charge, and I'm worried they'll see me as the bad guy for ruining the tradition. But I also feel like they're not respecting my time and effort by dumping everything on me year after year. Would I be the asshole if I didn't plan anything for New Year's Eve and just did my own thing instead? Am I the asshole for expecting my girlfriend to say goodbye? I have been in a long-distance relationship with my girlfriend for just over 7 months. We live about 3 hours apart by plane, and to cope with the distance, we often have small phone dates. These moments together mean a lot to me because they help us stay connected despite the physical separation. Yesterday, we had planned one of these phone dates. Around the time we were supposed to begin, I asked if she was ready, and she responded that she needed to clean up real quick because she was babysitting her niece the next day. I figured it was no big deal, so I waited for her. 2 hours went by. She finally texted to apologize, saying it was taking longer than she had expected. I assured her it was fine. I understand her living situation isn't easy. She still lives with her mom and sisters, and I know her family can be messy and leave the burden of cleaning to her. Another hour passed, and by this point, it was around 11 p.m. Since I had to wake up at 5 a.m. for work, I told her I was heading to bed. Honestly, I thought I'd wake up to a text from her acknowledging what happened or at least apologizing for how the evening turned out. However, when I woke up, there was nothing. No apology, no acknowledgement, just her regular good morning text. I didn't make a big deal out of it initially because I assumed she must have been tired. We started chatting as usual, talking about our plans for the day, but as the conversation went on, I found myself getting more and more annoyed. Eventually, I told her how I felt. Her reaction surprised me. She went on a rant about how she was just tired, fell asleep, and that I was overreacting. She said it wasn't a crime to fall asleep, which, of course, I know. I wasn't upset that she fell asleep. I was frustrated about the lack of communication. I didn't want to argue, so I dropped the subject. She was mostly absent during the day because she was busy babysitting her niece, which I completely understood. Later that evening, she promised to make it up to me. She mentioned she was going out for a drink with friends but assured me she'd be back by midnight and we could talk then. Midnight came and went, and instead of the phone call she had promised, I got a text from her apologizing again and saying we'd fix things tomorrow. This is the second day in a row she has stood me up, and honestly, I'm frustrated. I don't think it's unreasonable to be upset. It feels like I'm the only one prioritizing our time together. I tried to rationalize her behavior. She isn't cheating. I know because one of her friends, who's also a close friend of mine, confirmed they were out together. But it isn't about mistrust. It's about communication, something that is absolutely critical in a long-distance relationship. It doesn't take more than 30 seconds to send a text saying, "Hey, I'm exhausted, can we reschedule?" Or, "I'm sorry, I won't be able to make it tonight." I'm not upset that life gets busy. It happens, and I understand that. What bothers me is the lack of effort to communicate. I feel like I'm left waiting and guessing, which isn't fair in a relationship that relies so heavily on staying connected through words. So now I'm wondering, am I overreacting for feeling this way? Should I press the issue and tell her how much this has been bothering me? Or should I just let it go and move on? I don't want to come across as demanding or unreasonable, but I also don't want to feel like my feelings and time don't matter in this relationship. AITA for objecting to my fiancé's family involvement in our wedding planning. My fiancé, 27F, and I, 27M, have been together for a little over 2 years now and engaged for a few months. She means the world to me and is one of the most loving and caring people I've ever met. The biggest issue we face is the matter of money. We have differing views due to our respective upbringings. Growing up, I've never had much money, and that has never bothered me. My parents raised me on modest salaries. They weren't making bank by any means, but they had respectable work and gave their best. We were rich in other ways. My fiancé's family is more affluent. Money is something my fiancé and her family have never had to worry about, never needing a budget, scholarships, or any of that. My fiancé doesn't seem to understand why I object to her spending money on me and why I feel uncomfortable if she wants to treat me to an expensive restaurant, why I don't want her to upgrade my car, or why I don't want to accept loans from her parents. She feels that I'm being unnecessarily difficult and keeps telling me not to get caught up in pride and antiquated gender roles. But it has nothing to do with pride or gender roles for me. It has everything to do with balance. How could I let her give me things when I can't reciprocate in kind with a grand display? I feel like it'll just throw us out of balance. So this issue is increasingly glaring as we plan our wedding. My fiancé has always dreamed about what her wedding would be like. We both want the day to be special, a celebration of our love and a reflection of our journey together. My fiancé's family is known for huge, extravagant weddings. They go all out. It's almost like tradition for them. Being that my fiancé and I were aligned about what we wanted the core values of our wedding to be, we were in agreement that the wedding would be something more personal and intimate. That went out the window. The wedding's becoming more of a show or a production, and the guest list is over a mile long with people even my fiancé barely knows. The reason for the event is getting lost, and it feels like I have little to no real say. My fiancé's pretty much folded over and again feels I'm being unnecessarily difficult. She says her family has a certain way of doing things and that her parents are creating something special for us, but our wedding is still ours and I should focus on that. My parents understand where I'm coming from but try to lean toward the positive that maybe this is their way of welcoming me into the fold. Don't get me wrong, my fiancé's parents have been welcoming. I just feel like I've become a prop in the wedding, and like sometimes I'm being molded to fit a certain image. The whole thing has become a point of contention between my fiancé and myself. She feels one way, I feel another. I'm second-guessing myself. I don't know if this is a pick-your-battle kind of thing. Am I being unnecessarily difficult? AITA here? Am I the asshole for throwing a fit over having my privacy invaded? My name is Nico, I'm 15 years old, and I live in the upstairs portion of a rented house. The house is quite large, with 4 bedrooms upstairs where I stay with my family. 5 people, including me, live in this space. Our neighbors downstairs, Selena, 35, and Mark, 32, also rent a portion of the house. While we technically share the house, our living spaces are separate, except for one door that connects our areas, which is usually blocked off. Last week, Selena and Mark decided to come upstairs for reasons I still don't understand. My parents haven't given me a clear answer as to why. To get to my parents' room, they went through my room, which is connected to theirs via the blocked-off door. They opened the door, peeked into my space, and then proceeded on their way. At the time, I was in the middle of a private online therapy session for depression. It was 8 in the morning, and I was trying to focus on my session when this happened. To make matters worse, after learning about my therapy session, Selena and Mark began gossiping. They started spreading rumors around the neighborhood about my mental health, telling everyone I was depressed and calling me a poor child. They even embellished the story with other baseless rumors. I've always been labeled the weird kid, and this only amplified that. It felt like my privacy, something I already struggled to maintain, had been completely violated, and the humiliation was overwhelming. I broke down after this incident. I'm not proud of how I reacted, but I was furious and hurt. I threw a massive fit, yelling, crying, and lashing out in frustration. Having my privacy invaded like this has made my depression worse. I already feel like I'm constantly being watched, especially since my parents installed new cameras in the house last month. Now, with my neighbors spreading rumors about me, I feel even more exposed and vulnerable. After everything, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I removed the cameras in my room because I couldn't handle feeling like I was under constant surveillance. I also installed a latch lock on my door while my parents were out. I told them outright that if they and the neighbors continued to ignore my boundaries, I would lock myself in my room as my only means of protecting what little privacy I have left. This situation has taken a significant toll on my mental health. I feel like my boundaries are completely disregarded, and no one seems to care about how this affects me. I can't shake the feeling of betrayal, not just by my neighbors, but by my parents, who haven't defended me or even addressed the issue with them. Am I overreacting for being so upset? I feel like my reaction was justified, given how invasive and disrespectful their actions were. But part of me wonders if I handled it poorly or could have approached it differently. Was I wrong to throw a fit and demand boundaries, or do I have the right to stand up for my privacy? Am I the asshole for making new plans after my girlfriend delayed our original plans? I, 21M, had planned with my girlfriend, 21F, to spend Saturday together. We had set the plan on Friday, knowing I'd finish work by noon on Saturday and head to her place right after. The day was meant to include a trip to the store, followed by me cooking ribeye steaks while she baked cookies. A simple and cozy way to spend time together. On Saturday, after I finished work, she texted me asking if we could push our plans to a later time. I told her it wasn't an issue and to let me know when she'd be ready. Meanwhile, I stayed at home waiting for her update. Later, I found out she had gone to spend time with a male friend who was going through a tough time with some family drama. I respected her decision, as I understand how important it is to be there for friends who are struggling. Still, I kept an eye on the time, wondering when our plans would resume. As the hours passed, I started feeling uncertain about whether we'd still hang out. By 5 p.m., it seemed late for the plans we had in mind, so I messaged her at 5:35 p.m. to let her know I was going out to eat with my family soon, since I hadn't heard back from her. I also suggested we could hang out the next day instead. At 6:10 p.m., I left with my family to eat, assuming she was still busy with her friend. She called me at 6:44 p.m., and her tone made it clear she was upset. She asked why I hadn't called her or made more effort to check in before deciding on my new plans. I explained that I didn't want to interrupt her time with this specific friend, as there's some history there that makes me hesitant to do so. I thought I was being considerate by texting her earlier to update her about my plans. Despite my explanation, she remained upset, implying that I should have called her directly or made more of an effort to salvage our plans. From my perspective, I had waited for hours without much communication on her end. I tried to be understanding about her time with her friend, but felt it was fair to assume that our plans were no longer happening since she hadn't provided a clear update. So now I'm left wondering, was I wrong for making alternative plans when our original ones seemed to be on hold indefinitely? Did I handle this poorly, or is her reaction unwarranted? Am I the asshole for prioritizing clarity and making the most of my evening after being left in the dark for so long? Am I the asshole for not letting my mother move into my apartment after she repeatedly made poor decisions? I, 35F, am a single mother to my 16-year-old son, and we live in a 3-bedroom apartment. My mother, 59F, has a history of making impulsive decisions that often lead to chaos, and now she's asking to move in with me, which has put me in a tough position. About a year ago, my mother decided to quit her stable government teaching job, even though she was just 2 years away from retirement. On top of that, she sold her house and moved into a tiny commercial space with my older brother, who is disabled. The space she chose didn't even have basic amenities like a shower. She made this decision because she picked up a single sewing job and thought it was smarter to rent a commercial space instead of a proper apartment. I had no idea about any of this until months later. 5 months after moving into the commercial space, my mother contacted me, saying my brother's health was deteriorating rapidly and that I needed to visit him immediately. Of course, I rushed over the next day, but when I saw him, he looked fine. She casually explained that he had miraculously improved overnight, and then dropped a bombshell about quitting her job, selling her house, and failing to pay the last month's rent on her space. She also mentioned she had just 10 days before she would have to move out. When I asked her what her plan was, she said she'd stay with my younger sister if she couldn't come up with the money. The very next day, she messaged me asking for financial help, but I couldn't afford to lend her money at the time. Over the following months, she kept offering me money for unrelated things, like braces for my son or financial help when I quit a toxic job where I was being sexually harassed. I refused every time because I felt she should be using her money to sort out her life. Plus, she has a habit of using financial help as leverage to guilt or manipulate people into doing what she wants. At some point, my sister stepped in to help her, letting her stay at her place, but I heard through the grapevine that my sister had given her 4 months' notice to find a new place because she couldn't handle the situation anymore. My mother also placed my brother in a care home, a decision she hated because she wanted to maintain control over his government assistance money. I've always been independent, especially because my parents made me feel like my very existence was a burden. I've been on my own since I was 16, and I've worked hard to create a stable, peaceful life for my son and myself. My mother's poor decisions have caused so much strain, and now she's asking to move in with me for a short time to get back on her feet. When I received her message, I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I called my sister to get the full picture. She told me that she had done everything she could to help our mom, but couldn't continue because no one else in the family was stepping up. I completely understood her frustration because I've experienced the same dynamic for years. Letting my mom move in feels like it would unravel everything I've worked to build. I don't have a stable job. I'm self-employed and just started a business, so money is extremely tight. On top of that, my mother is not an easy person to live with. She's inconsiderate, doesn't respect boundaries, and has a history of taking more than she gives. Every time I've allowed family to stay with me in the past, it has left me emotionally drained, financially depleted, and struggling to rebuild my peace and stability. This is the first time in years that I feel like I'm creating a safe, steady environment for my son and myself. Letting her move in would put that at risk, but at the same time I feel guilty because she's my mother, and I know she's struggling. Would I be the asshole for putting my sons and my well-being first and refusing to let her move in? Am I the asshole for being fed up with my coworkers' constant passive aggression and vague comments? I, 23F, have been struggling with a coworker, Ted, early 30 SM, whose behavior has become increasingly invasive and passive-aggressive. When Ted and I first started working together, we got along well, but things took a turn. He began bombarding me with messages, both work-related and personal, on every platform imaginable. Teams, Instagram, and even non-work channels. It became overwhelming, so I eventually set a boundary and asked him to contact me only about work during work hours and to stick to work-related channels. He respected this for a while, but the issues didn't stop. Ted describes himself as a people pleaser, but it feels more like he demands constant validation. If he doesn't get the attention he craves, he becomes visibly upset and will hold on to perceived slights for months, bringing them up long after the fact. He also found my personal Reddit account, where I post about private matters. Instead of respecting my privacy, he made cryptic comments hinting that he'd read my posts. At one point, he admitted knowing my account but claimed he didn't look at it anymore, a claim I find hard to believe given his behavior. Ted's vague and passive-aggressive comments are exhausting. For instance, during a conversation about quitting smoking, I suggested trying vape juice with nicotine. He responded with, "I put it on Instagram that I'm quitting nicotine," and stared at me with wide eyes for what felt like an eternity. It's like he was trying to punish me for not following his every move on social media. At our recent work Christmas party, things escalated. He accused me of ignoring his team's message inviting me to pre-drinks, even though I hadn't seen it, likely due to bad signal. Later, he asked cryptic questions like, "Have you ever had that thing where someone asks about you but doesn't actually speak to you?" I was baffled and asked him to clarify, but he kept saying, "Oh, it doesn't matter." When I pushed further, he admitted he was upset I hadn't messaged him during his medical leave, even though he'd heard I had asked about his well-being through a colleague. I tried to explain that I didn't want to reopen direct communication given our history, but the entire interaction left me drained. To top it off, he berated me for not replying to a WhatsApp message even though everyone, including Ted, knows I don't use WhatsApp. I'm notorious for being slow to reply to messages in general, which my friends understand, but Ted seems to take it personally despite being just a coworker. I've tried various approaches, being blunt, being gentle, phasing him out, but nothing seems to work. I've also spoken to other coworkers about it, but they dismiss his behavior with comments like, "Oh, he has issues," or, "I'm sure he didn't mean it that way." Their responses make me wonder if I'm overreacting or misinterpreting things because I'm autistic and sometimes struggle with social cues. Still, Ted's constant neediness, cryptic remarks, and passive aggression feel incredibly invasive and exhausting. I don't know how much longer I can tolerate this. So, am I the asshole for being fed up with Ted? If not, how can I handle this situation without causing unnecessary drama at work? Am I the asshole? Dead Mom Edition. I grew up as the only child of a single mother. My mom was my entire world, and though life was tough, we had each other. My mother had a sister who had two daughters, Margaret and Lindsay, my cousins, who are at least 10 years older than me. Growing up, I admired them, though they were a bit spoiled. They lived comfortably on Long Island, and I saw them as role models despite our very different upbringings. A few years ago, tragedy struck our family when both my mom and their mom were diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Earlier this year, my mom passed away peacefully in her sleep. Though it was heartbreaking, I found solace in knowing she went peacefully, which felt like a small mercy after the challenges she'd faced in her life. The first person I called to share the news was Margaret. She offered to notify the extended family, and I appreciated her support in what felt like an overwhelming moment. In hindsight, her eagerness to take control should have been a red flag. I agreed to let her inform everyone, but I also personally reached out to a few family members I'm particularly close to. The next day, I was blindsided. Family members started calling me, saying Margaret was upset that I had stolen the chance for her to share the news with everyone. She felt it was her role, and apparently my personal calls undermined her. To make matters worse, I learned she was spreading an incredibly cruel and baseless rumor that my mom's death might not have been natural, that I had something to do with it. Hearing this on the very day after my mom's death was devastating. Margaret and Lindsay's behavior escalated. The day before the funeral, they tried to have the venue changed without consulting me. At the funeral itself, they demanded the right to make speeches, claiming my mom was their other mother. It was baffling and infuriating because, while they may have had fond memories of her, they hadn't visited her in the 5 years since we moved abroad. Their actions felt self-serving, disrespectful, and completely detached from the reality of my grief. Now, fast forward to the present. I'm getting married to the love of my life, and I've made it clear that I don't want Margaret and Lindsay at my wedding. Their behavior around my mom's death and funeral was the final straw in a long history of one-sided relationships. They weren't there for my mom or me when it mattered, and they caused me immense pain during one of the darkest times of my life. Some family members think I'm being too harsh. They argue that I should forgive and forget, emphasizing that Margaret and Lindsay are suffering too from the loss of their mom and that family should stick together. They believe I should let bygones be bygones and invite them to my wedding. But I can't. Their actions went beyond thoughtlessness. They were cruel and selfish. Forgiving them feels impossible, and I don't want to risk them disrupting one of the happiest days of my life. I'm building a future with my fiancé, and I want our wedding to be a celebration of love and joy, not a reminder of betrayal and pain. So, am I the asshole for refusing to invite them to my wedding, despite my family's pressure to reconcile? Am I the asshole for ignoring my husband's longtime friends after they showed up unannounced and entered our home? My husband has some college friends from 20 years ago. While they were close back then, they've lived far apart since, so their friendship has been distant. I've been with my husband for 10 years, and while I know these friends, I've never been close to them. 2 days ago, they texted my husband saying they'd be driving through our area and asked what we were doing Saturday night. We already had a packed weekend, so my husband explained our plans in detail. That was the last we heard from them until today. While we were out at a holiday event with my family, my husband got a call from one of them saying they were getting close, but then lost reception. My husband reassured me they wouldn't just show up unannounced. Well, they did. Using a door code we must have given them over a year ago, they entered our home without calling or texting first. I watched the whole thing unfold on our Ring camera and received notifications from our smart lock. I was horrified. While they've stayed with us in the past, I never expected them to hold on to our door code and just let themselves in. To make matters worse, our home wasn't in a state to host guests. I'm 30 weeks pregnant, and we have a resident cat and a sick foster kitten who I've been nursing back to health. There were boxes in the living room, dirty dishes in the kitchen, clothes on the bathroom floor, and no clean sheets for the spare bed. The spare room they used to stay in has been turned into a nursery, so there's no extra bed for their teenager. They wouldn't have known this because they never asked. On top of that, they brought their newly adopted dog into our house, which was another shock. I was worried about how our cat would handle an unfamiliar dog in her space, especially since it was unsupervised while we were out. I was already feeling overwhelmed with the holiday events, my pregnancy, and taking care of a sick kitten. This uninvited intrusion left me feeling violated and disrespected. When we got home, they stayed up to hang out with my husband, but I was too upset to engage. I walked past them without saying hi. My husband encouraged me to socialize and be polite, but I couldn't bring myself to put on a friendly face. To me, their behavior, entering our home without asking, was beyond rude. They'll be staying the night, and I'm dreading interacting with them in the morning. My husband thinks I should be more understanding, but I feel completely disrespected. Am I the asshole for ignoring them and not trying to be polite, even though they entered my home uninvited and disrupted my peace? Or is my reaction justified given the circumstances? Am I the asshole for loving to be around my boyfriend but only when his brothers aren't around? I, 30F, have been in a relationship with Jack, 23M, for about a year and a half. Jack is one of triplets, and while I care deeply for him, I found myself struggling with how he acts when his brothers are around. To give some context, I was single for 2 years after my relationship with my kid's father ended before meeting Jack. I wasn't looking for a relationship, but Jack's charm, humor, and good conversations won me over. We've been taking things slow. He hasn't met my kids yet, 8M, 7F, and 3M, because I don't want them to get attached until I'm sure about our future together. When it's just me and Jack, things are great. He's attentive, caring, and fun to be around. He calls me throughout the day, and we see each other regularly despite living separately. However, when his brothers are around, he changes in ways that bother me. When he's with them, Jack becomes more jealous and possessive about other men. He speaks to me in a harsher tone, and it feels like his brother's opinions suddenly become his top priority. For example, he'll walk ahead of me in public when we're with his brothers. But when it's just us, or even us with friends, he's affectionate and holds my hand. His brothers often make inappropriate remarks about women, which bothers me because none of them are single. Jack joins in, which feels disrespectful not just to me, but to the other women in their lives. After spending time with his brothers, we tend to argue more than usual, which is exhausting. I feel like I'm starting to resent spending time with him when his brothers are involved. But I don't want to ask him to choose between me and his family. They're his blood, and I know how important that bond is. At the same time, I don't want to keep harboring this resentment. It's unfair to both of us, but I also feel like it's valid. Am I the asshole for wanting to avoid situations where his brothers are around? Or is there a better way for me to address this without asking him to choose sides? Am I the asshole for deciding not to go to my family's Christmas dinner due to financial struggles? Every year, my family does Secret Santa to keep holiday gift-giving affordable. We each buy one gift for an adult and gifts for the younger kids. About a week before Christmas, we typically gather for dinner and exchange gifts. This year, it was originally planned to be at my parents' house, which is centrally located. My sisters live about an hour away from me, but only 25 minutes from my parents. However, 2 days ago, my mom texted to say the dinner would now be at my older sister's house because she never gets to host things. While I understand the sentiment, my family is currently in a tough financial situation. We're $400 short for our mortgage, can't afford groceries, and are $300 in the red in our bank account. Gas for the trip was simply not something we could afford. I told my mom that if the dinner was moved, my family wouldn't be able to attend due to the extra travel costs. To make sure my nieces, nephew, and Secret Santa recipients still got their gifts, I sent the presents along. With my mom, I also asked her to bring back the gifts meant for us and our kids. My husband, trying to help our situation, even picked up an overtime shift instead of attending. Today, my older sister called me and accused me of being selfish for not attending. This struck a nerve because I've dropped everything to help her many times in the past. I found her a lawyer to help her get custody when her first child's father caused issues, lent her $1,000 when she neglected her garbage bill and was facing eviction, money I haven't been paid back, and paid for her gas and car repairs on multiple occasions. When she called me selfish, I lost my temper and told her exactly how I felt. I pointed out how much I've helped her and how her comment was hurtful and hypocritical. After that, I removed myself from the situation entirely, blocking her and stepping away from family communication. Now, my parents are ignoring me, and I don't know where things stand with my sister. I'm starting to feel guilty for going off on her and skipping the dinner. Am I the asshole for prioritizing my family's financial stability over attending a holiday gathering, even if it upset my sister and parents? Am I the asshole for being upset with my friends who won't stop bringing up my ex, despite knowing how I feel about it? About a year ago, I ended a 7-month relationship with my ex. It was a terrible experience. He barely put any effort into the relationship. He wouldn't text or talk to me unless I initiated, avoided affection, and made me feel like I wasn't in a real relationship. The breakup was the icing on the cake. He dumped me because his friend told him to. I've moved on completely and have no feelings for him. The issue lies with my 3 closest friends, Jane, Mary, and Paula. While I was with him, they hated him and frequently pointed out how bad he was for me. They even joked about breaking us up because they thought I deserved better. But now, for some reason, they won't stop bringing him up. They constantly ship us, saying things like, "You'll get back together someday," or "It's fate," and the worst part? They're not joking, they genuinely seem to believe it. I've told them multiple times how much it bothers me. Once, I asked Jane why they were talking about me and my ex, and she smirked and said, "I know you still like him." She completely dismissed my feelings, even when I got visibly upset. Another time, I confided in Mary that I liked someone else, but she brushed it off with, "You'll end up with your ex anyway," and kept pushing it despite me making it clear I was angry. The worst moment was when Mary joked about letting me hang out with him again, after we supposedly got back together. Jane and Paula laughed along. It was infuriating because they know how he treated me and how much this bothers me. It feels like they're disregarding my feelings entirely, treating my emotions like a joke or something they understand better than I do. I haven't confronted all three of them together yet, but I've told Jane and Mary directly that this upsets me. Despite that, they still haven't stopped. It's exhausting. I feel like they're completely invalidating my feelings and talking about me behind my back. Now, I'm questioning if I could have handled this differently. Should I have been more forceful? Am I overreacting to what they might see as harmless fun? Or am I right to feel upset and disrespected? Am I the asshole for canceling fluid plans with a friend because of a work commitment? I work for a highly successful business owner who hosts elaborate parties at his home every couple of months. While the parties can be enjoyable, they're a bit awkward for me as a single guy surrounded by married and long-term couples. Recently, my boss invited me to his New Year's Eve party. Initially, I wasn't very enthusiastic about attending and shared this with a longtime friend. We've been friends for almost 20 years. They suggested that the two of us make alternate plans, dinner and possibly watching fireworks afterward. They even said, if something or someone better comes along, do that instead, which made it sound like the plans were fluid. Ultimately, I decided to attend my boss's party. Declining the invite could have professional consequences, and I thought it would be wise to show up. When I told my friend yesterday about my decision, I expected understanding, especially given their earlier statement about doing something else if a better option came along. To my surprise, they were upset. They said the dinner reservation couldn't be canceled because it was prepaid, which I had no idea about, and that they'd been looking forward to the evening. They also mentioned they had bought a new outfit specifically for the dinner. I feel like I'm being unfairly criticized. I didn't ask them to make a prepaid reservation, and their earlier comment made it seem like they weren't overly invested in the plans. The decision to attend the party wasn't about having a better time. It was a career-focused move. Still, I feel bad because my friend was clearly looking forward to our plans, and I understand how my decision might have hurt them. Am I the asshole for canceling plans that I thought were casual and flexible, or is my friend being unreasonable for reacting this way? Am I the asshole? Husband got mad that I went to the ER because he lost 4 hours of work because of me. I, 29F, am 6 months pregnant with our third child. Husband, 29M, is self-employed and makes his own hours. He usually works all day, comes home to help with dinner and bedtime with our kids, 4 and 2, and then goes back to his studio office until about 11 p.m. He is a designer and cannot WFH. After dinner last night, I went to unplug a cord and the plug came off, leaving the metal in the socket. I know this will sound stupid, but without thinking I grabbed the metal to pull it out and got an electric shock. I was able to pull away but felt the electricity go into my hand, up my arm, across my shoulders, and down my other arm and left side of my torso. I had minor burn marks on my hand. I felt okay but really worried about the baby. I was very nervous and decided to call my OB/GYN on call. He asked if I could feel the baby moving, but I could not. He did not want to diagnose anything and said to get checked at the ER. My husband stayed home to watch the kids, and I could tell he was irritated because he could not go back to work, and for him/us, time is money. At the ER, I and the baby were checked and I was relieved that all vitals were fine. Took a couple hours, but I was so relieved. Here's the problem. When I got home, I expected my husband to be equally relieved and grateful all was okay. Instead, when I walked in the door, he said, "Do you realize you just wasted my whole night when I could have been working?" I was so shocked and upset that I turned around and left. Drove around for an hour or so just to calm down. It had been such a scary experience, and to come home to his anger was too much. He didn't text me while I was out, and I didn't text him. I just eventually went home and to bed. I feel guilty because I should have had common sense and not grabbed the metal prongs. I think I was just rushed and distracted, or something. The kids were already in bed, so it's not like I left him to deal with bedtime alone. I just wanted to make sure the baby was okay. He is doing his usual silent treatment today. He talked, but only what was necessary to get the day started. He'll probably not mention it again, but just be cold until he decides he's over it. Here's the question. Since I felt okay after getting shocked, should I have just left it alone? Or waited till later on to deal with it? Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for refusing to ban alcohol from Christmas? We have a large, mixed family that gathers at our home every Christmas. My wife is Mexican, so Christmas Eve becomes a lively celebration with her family dropping by. There's tequila, tamales, and laughter as everyone mingles and celebrates. The next day, my side of the family comes for Christmas dinner. In total, we can have over 50 people coming in and out of our house over the 2 days. It's a vibrant, bustling holiday filled with cultural traditions, good food, and drinks. I'm often gifted bottles of spirits during the festivities, and my wife enjoys wine. For us, it's a time to celebrate with our family traditions, something that involves good food and good drinks shared with loved ones. This year, however, there's a wrinkle. My older brother Mike recently started dating a woman named Jenny. I've met her briefly, along with her 3 kids, during a summer barbecue. That's the extent of our interaction. Now, Mike has asked if Jenny and her kids could join us for Christmas. Naturally, I was open to the idea until he hit me with her request. Jenny insists her children cannot be around. People who drink. Not shouldn't. Not would prefer not to. * cannot star. For Jenny, this means banning all alcohol at our home during Christmas to accommodate her family. This struck me as not only impractical but also unreasonable given how ingrained drinks are in our celebrations. When I explained that our holiday traditions include alcohol and that I didn't plan to ban it, Mike wasn't happy. He insisted that for Jenny's kids to feel comfortable, I should make my home a dry household for Christmas. He also pointed out that Jenny's kids like my family, and that it was important to make them feel welcome. My mother, to my surprise, sided with Mike and Jenny. She argued that alcohol isn't necessary during Christmas and suggested we could set it aside for 1 year. She mentioned that having alcohol around isn't the most kid-friendly thing. Even though my wife and I have 2 kids of our own, aged 5 and 8, who thrive in the lively, festive atmosphere. They love playing with their cousins and being part of the mix of cultures and traditions that makes our Christmas special. It's worth mentioning that there aren't any other children on my side of the family, so Jenny's kids would be the only new additions. The idea that I should change our long-standing traditions for children who don't regularly spend time with us feels unfair. Jenny's request doesn't just stop at alcohol, though. She's also asked for some accommodation around the concept of Santa Claus. Santa Claus hasn't been a significant part of Christmas in our home. My wife, coming from a Mexican Catholic background, didn't grow up with the naughty or nice narrative. We decided early on to treat Santa as more of a fun symbol of Christmas, not a central figure. This approach has worked well for our family and my kids' cousins, who are used to it by now. Jenny, however, is deeply into Santa traditions and the elf on the shelf phenomenon. Her children, aged 4 to 10, fully believe in Santa, and she's concerned about how my family's approach might conflict with her children's experience of Christmas. I honestly don't see how I can manage these 2 very different parenting styles under one roof during the chaos of Christmas. My kids and their cousins are used to our traditions, and I don't want to ask them to suddenly pretend Santa is real for the sake of Jenny's kids. I can only imagine the confusion, awkwardness, and potential arguments that could result from trying to enforce that. It feels like setting myself up for a holiday disaster. I suggested to Mike that perhaps next year my mom could host Christmas, or that he and Jenny could take on hosting duties themselves, if they're still together by then. This year, however, I think it's best for Jenny and her kids to stay home if our traditions are too incompatible with theirs. I explained that my house, my rules, and my family's traditions are important to us. Mike and my mother have both accused me of being inflexible and dismissive of Jenny and her kids. They claim I'm excluding them and being selfish for not making adjustments to make them feel welcome. But to me, it feels like they're asking too much. Adjusting our holiday celebrations to suit Jenny's preferences would mean fundamentally changing what Christmas means for us, something I'm not willing to do for someone I've only met once. So, am I the asshole for refusing to ban alcohol and alter my family's traditions to accommodate Jenny and her kids? Am I the asshole for ignoring a guy who harassed me for years after he sent me a 28-page Google Doc asking me out as a birthday present? I, 17F, was recently asked out by a guy, 16M, from my grade, someone I've known for about 6 years. While we were friendly when we first met, we were never particularly close, just casual acquaintances. Things took a sharp turn when he broke up with his middle school girlfriend of 3 months. For reasons I still don't fully understand, he started directing his frustrations at me. He began calling me names like cold and unaffectionate, as if I was somehow to blame for his issues. One incident stands out more than the others. He locked me in a room and demanded that I kiss him. I repeatedly said no, but he wouldn't let me leave, insisting that I was just nervous and needed to give him a chance. It was terrifying, and I felt completely powerless. At the time, he didn't even apologize. Now, years later, he claims to regret it but downplays the seriousness of what happened, making it seem like a misunderstanding rather than a blatant disregard for my boundaries. When mutual friends started speculating that he had feelings for me, he didn't handle it maturely. Instead, he started spreading rumors, claiming that I was obsessed with him. He even pressured me to post on social media to clear his name, demanding that I explain to everyone that there was nothing going on. The situation was humiliating, but I complied, hoping it would put an end to the drama. Around 2 years ago, I tried confiding in a mutual friend about his behavior, hoping to find support. Unfortunately, he found out and became enraged. He accused me of gaslighting him and retaliated by spreading even more rumors about me. To make matters worse, he got his older sister involved, and she encouraged her senior friends to harass me when I was just a freshman. It felt like I was under attack from all sides. The harassment didn't stop there. He recruited people I barely knew to make mean-spirited comments about me to my face. At the same time, he pretended to be my ally, acting confused about why others were being so cruel to me. It was a manipulative tactic, one that left me feeling isolated and unsure of who I could trust. Fast forward to now, 3 years after the worst of it, he's decided it's time to apologize. But the timing is suspect, to say the least. Recently, he called me out of the blue and confessed his feelings, rambling for 3 hours about how perfect we'd be together. I listened politely and then told him I wasn't interested, explaining that I was talking to someone else and only saw him as a distant friend. At first, he seemed to take the rejection well. But within days, he began flooding my phone with hundreds of messages, not an exaggeration, along with multiple long voice notes, each 8 to 10 minutes, where he cried and tried to explain his perspective. I felt overwhelmed and blocked his number for a while, hoping he'd move on. Then came my birthday. As a gift, he sent me a 28-page Google document, a letter where he apologized for his character-defining mistakes and praised me for the life lessons I taught him. In the same breath, he dismissed my reasons for rejecting him, claiming the real issue was that I didn't find him physically attractive. The whole thing felt manipulative, like he was trying to guilt me into dating him while glossing over the harm he caused me over the years. The letter creeped me out. It wasn't just the length, it was the tone. It read like he was rewriting history, trying to frame our relationship as something deeper than it ever was, and twisting his past behavior to make himself look like a victim of his own emotions. Since then, I've been ignoring him completely. I haven't responded to his texts or calls, and I've made it clear through my silence that I don't want to engage with him. Despite this, he hasn't stopped. He's sent more messages, offering to help me with schoolwork or other things, but it's clear he's just looking for an excuse to force a conversation. Now, I'm being told by a few mutual friends that I'm overreacting. They argue that his letter was a genuine apology and that I'm being harsh by ghosting him after he went to such lengths to express his feelings. But I can't shake the feeling that his actions are manipulative, not sincere. After everything he put me through, locking me in a room, spreading rumors involving others in his harassment, it feels like I'm finally setting a boundary by ignoring him. So, am I the asshole for ghosting him and ignoring his birthday gift? Am I the asshole for selling my house out from under my son and his girlfriend? I, 60F, have rented my second home to my son Joe, 34M, for the past 7 years. When he first moved in, he shared the house with some friends and paid below market rent. Our lease agreements included provisions for reasonable rent increases over time, and I was upfront from the beginning. The home was part of my retirement nest egg. If the investment ever became a financial risk, I would have to sell the property. There were a few instances over the years where financial challenges arose, and I reminded Joe of this possibility. Once, the homeowner's insurance was canceled because the house wasn't being properly maintained. I stepped in to make corrections and got the insurance reinstated. Twice, I lost my job and struggled to keep up with the mortgage on both the rental and my primary home, but I found new work quickly and avoided any major crises. Each of these situations prompted serious conversations with Joe, where I explained that the house might have to be sold if things ever worsened. Years ago, I also suggested that Joe start saving money, in case he ever wanted to buy the house. At the time, he wasn't interested, but that seemed to change about 2 years ago when his girlfriend, 32F, moved in. They asked their housemates to leave so they could live there as a couple, and she spearheaded an effort to clean up and better maintain the house. I was thrilled to see them taking more pride in the place and thought our relationship was on solid ground. Then, in 2023, the neighborhood began to change drastically. Investors were buying up properties at inflated prices, turning them into rentals or leaving them vacant for months. Crime increased. A shooting happened just a block away. The market was red hot, but it was clear it wouldn't stay that way forever. I decided it was time to sell the house while prices were still high and before the neighborhood's decline impacted its value. In the fall of 2023, I had a conversation with Joe and his girlfriend. I explained my reasoning and gave them nearly a year's notice to find a new place, setting a timeline for them to move out by the fall of 2024. We also discussed their finances, and it became clear they couldn't afford to buy the house, either now or likely in the future, given how much property values had risen. It was a difficult conversation, but I tried to approach it respectfully and give them ample time to prepare. Unfortunately, things took a sharp turn after that. Joe's girlfriend became openly rude to me, both in person and via text. When they moved out, I discovered petty, vindictive messages left behind in the house. To make matters worse, they refused to share their new address with anyone in the family. I was devastated but still wanted to honor a promise I made in 2017 to give Joe a portion of the profit from the sale. After the sale was finalized, I wrote him a check as promised. The next day, he changed his phone number and went completely no contact. Joe eventually called his father, 71M, my ex, but made it clear he still wouldn't share his address. He told his dad that if I ever got his number, he'd just change it again. He said they cut me out of their lives because I sold the house out from under them. My ex seems to sympathize with him but isn't taking sides. Meanwhile, I'm heartbroken. I thought I handled the situation as fairly as possible under the circumstances, but now I'm questioning whether I could have done more to make them feel secure. So, am I the asshole for selling my house? I gave them plenty of notice, tried to include Joe in the profit, and prioritized my retirement security, but they see it as a betrayal. I'm struggling to reconcile their reaction with what I thought was a reasonable and necessary decision. Am I the asshole for not allowing popcorn on the Christmas tree? I, 35F, and my husband, 36M, are hosting Christmas this year for my brother, 33M, his wife, 33F, and their 2 kids, 6F and 2M. Everything has been going well overall, but there's one issue causing some tension: the tradition of stringing popcorn on the Christmas tree. Growing up, my brother and I never did this, but it's something my sister-in-law's family has always done, and she's passed it down to her kids. For them, it's a fun and meaningful tradition. However, my husband and I have had issues with bugs in the house recently, and this is where the problem comes in. A while back, we noticed flies swarming in the kitchen and ants crawling around the counters. We traced it to a period when we were too busy to keep the kitchen as clean as usual. Since then, we've worked hard to eliminate the problem by deep cleaning, using sprays and setting traps. Things are under control now, but we've adopted a strict no food left out rule to keep the bugs from coming back. We're worried that stringing popcorn on the tree might attract pests, undoing all our efforts. When we explained this to my brother and his wife, they got upset. They said the kids were looking forward to stringing popcorn and would be very disappointed if they couldn't continue the tradition. My sister-in-law, in particular, insisted we were overreacting and being ridiculous by thinking the popcorn would cause a bug problem. While we feel bad about disappointing the kids, we're standing firm on the no-food rule because we don't want to risk another pest issue. We've tried to explain our concerns and even suggested other holiday crafts or tree decorations the kids might enjoy, but they haven't been receptive. My sister-in-law seems particularly offended, saying this tradition is important to her family and that we're spoiling the kids' Christmas by refusing. My husband and I genuinely believe it's not worth the risk, but we also hate the idea of letting the kids down or causing unnecessary conflict during the holidays. So, are we the assholes for sticking to our no popcorn rule? We feel like we're trying to protect our home, but we don't want to come across as unwelcoming or unreasonable. Am I the asshole for not going wedding dress shopping with my best friend to study for my finals? I'm in the middle of finals right now, and they're the most important exams I've had to date. The results of these exams will directly determine my final grade and whether I can graduate. I've been working really hard over the past few weeks, studying every single day without taking much of a break. I honestly feel like I'm about to burn out because I've barely had time to eat properly, let alone do anything else. I know it's not healthy, but this is the biggest academic moment of my life, and I can't afford to mess it up. The idea of all my hard work going to waste just because I didn't put in enough time for studying is terrifying to me. Now, my best friend and I have been close for around 10 years, so I really care about her. A few weeks ago, she suddenly announced that she was getting married, and that the wedding was only 2 to 3 weeks away. She essentially blindsided me with the news, and I'll be honest, I didn't even know she was talking to this guy. It felt a little weird to hear that she was marrying someone I didn't know existed. She had told me she was dating someone, but I didn't realize how serious it was. In fact, I hadn't even heard her talk about him that much. So to find out that they were already engaged and planning a wedding so quickly just felt like a shock to me. The whole thing has been rushed for her too, and she's been busy getting everything ready, from picking her dress to arranging makeup, jewelry, and all the details. Thankfully, she has an amazing family who's been helping her, and I know she's not completely alone in this. But when she told me about the wedding, I felt a little hurt and left out because she hadn't mentioned him or her plans to get married earlier. She kept things pretty private, and I feel like I was just blindsided by the whole situation. I'll admit that I'm not fond of her fiancé, but I'm trying to keep that to myself and not let it affect my relationship with her. Of course, I want to be there for her, especially when it comes to picking out her wedding dress. I'd love to be there when she gets all ready for her big day. But the reality is that I have been so buried in studying for these exams that I've had no time to do anything else. She's invited me multiple times to go dress shopping and has told me that it's okay if I can't make it because she knows I'm studying. But deep down, I get the sense that she's annoyed with me. She's left me on read on messages and hasn't answered my calls. I know she's probably under a lot of stress with wedding planning, but I can't help but feel like I'm letting her down by not being there for her as much as I should be. This has made me question whether I'm doing the right thing by focusing so heavily on my exams and not putting more effort into being a supportive friend. I feel guilty because she's my oldest and dearest friend, and I care so much about her. I just don't know if I'm being unreasonable by choosing my exams over being there for her during this important time in her life. To complicate things further, I've been told by several people close to me that I might have autism, though I haven't been formally diagnosed yet. I live in a country where adult autism diagnoses can take years, so I haven't been able to get a proper evaluation. I don't know if this affects how I interpret things, but I often struggle to fully grasp social cues or understand how people might feel in situations like this. It's possible that I just don't see where I'm going wrong, but I'm genuinely unsure. I'm starting to wonder if I'm being an asshole by focusing so much on my exams and not recognizing how much this wedding means to my best friend. I know that she's probably disappointed in me, and I hate that feeling, but at the same time, I don't know what else I could do. Should I be prioritizing her wedding over my finals? Or is it okay to focus on my academic future, given how much work I've put in? I don't want to lose her as a friend, but I also don't want to fail these exams. Should I have made more of an effort to be there for her? Or am I justified in putting my exams first? I just hope she never sees this because I feel like I might be the one in the wrong. Would I be the asshole if I make my mother leave our house after overstaying her welcome? So here's the situation. My mom, 60s, recently retired, and after years of talking about moving back home to Canada, she decided to do it after she stopped working. My husband and I, 32, live in Tennessee, and we've been here for almost 30 years. My mom asked if she could stay with us for a couple of weeks between her retirement and her flight to Canada, and we agreed. But then she ended up staying for an entire month, June. I was a little taken aback but didn't say anything because she's my mom, and I wanted to be accommodating. In July, she left to go to Canada, and was supposed to return in October to stay for a few months before the holidays. The plan was for her to stay with a friend or a roommate when she got back to the US. But as things happened, that fell through and she asked if she could stay with us again. I wasn't sure about it, but when she basically showed up at my doorstep with no other options, I didn't feel like I could turn her away. That was in early October, and now it's almost Christmas. So she's been here for nearly 3 months, and I am really starting to feel the strain. My boyfriend is frustrated. He pays for all of our bills, and he feels like it's no longer a comfortable situation for him. Our house is tiny. We have 3 kids, a dog, and now my mom has completely taken over the living room and couch. There's literally no space left for us to just hang out as a family, or even to watch TV without feeling like we're intruding on her space. She's been here so long that I'm starting to wonder if she even plans on leaving. I know I need to have a conversation with her about finding somewhere else to stay, but I'm struggling. I feel guilty because she doesn't really have anywhere else to go. But at the same time, my boyfriend and I are in our 30s, we have our own family, and we simply don't have the space to accommodate her anymore. She has an income, so it's not like she can't afford to find a place. I just don't know how to tell her that she has to leave when I feel like I'm abandoning her. I'm torn because I want to support my mom, but I also don't want to ruin my relationship with my boyfriend over this. He's really frustrated that I've let this go on for so long. He feels like he should have more of a say in this, especially since he's paying for everything. So, would I be the asshole for telling my mom she has to find somewhere else to stay? How do I handle this situation without making her feel like I don't care about her, but also not letting it destroy my relationship? Would I be the asshole if I ask my friend not to join us at the table at a dinner? So, a bit of backstory. I'm 35, and my husband is 33. We have 2 kids, ages 6 and 3. One of my friends, 28, is the ex of my cousin, and she also has 2 kids, ages 6 and 3. Her kids are my nephew and niece. We all attend the same swimming club, and every year there's a spaghetti night to support the club. The issue is that my friend has a tendency to gossip and badmouth people, and I've had issues with her in the past. I've set clear boundaries with her about this behavior, but she keeps doing it. Recently, at this spaghetti night, she invited someone she's previously badmouthed. I don't know this person very well. I've only met them twice, but I've seen my friend talk poorly about them, and I'm not comfortable with the idea of spending time around them. Here's where I'm at. I've been struggling with some severe depression, and I'm trying to focus on the people who are close to me right now. I just don't have the mental energy to deal with unnecessary tension or gossip, especially from someone I've already had boundary issues with. I can't tell my friend who to invite, that's her prerogative. But I do feel like I don't have to socialize with this person if I don't want to. So, my question is, would I be the asshole if I politely asked them not to sit with us at the table during this dinner? I should also mention that if it weren't for my niece and nephew, I probably wouldn't stay in contact with this friend anymore. So, Wibda, would it be rude to ask her not to join us at the table for my own mental peace? Am I the asshole for giving up my sister's cat? Here's the situation. My sister, 15, has a cat that she keeps in the upstairs living room of our parents' house. This room is where my siblings and I, 18, spend most of our free time, as it's where we have our games and the TV. My sister decided to move the cat and the litter box into this shared space, but she refuses to clean the litter regularly. It often sits untouched for weeks, sometimes even a month. The smell and mess are overwhelming, and I've had to complain to our parents to get her to clean it. Even when I manage to get her to clean up the litter box, it's always after a fight or with lots of attitude. Beyond that, the cat sometimes pukes on the floor or my desk, and my sister refuses to clean that up, too. It's frustrating because the cat's care falls on me and the rest of the family, even though it's her responsibility. I tried talking to her about the possibility of rehoming the cat. During this conversation, she got angry and gave me attitude because I interrupted her game. She never brought it up again after that day, and there's been no effort on her part to change the situation or step up to take better care of the cat. I eventually decided to take action. After getting approval from everyone involved, including my parents, I found someone willing to adopt the cat and committed to rehoming it. My sister is the only one who doesn't agree with this decision, but she's also made it clear through her actions, or lack of them, that she's unwilling to take proper care of the cat. For what it's worth, I didn't make this decision lightly, and I did get explicit approval from my mom before looking for a new home for the cat. I feel bad because I know my sister might feel like I'm taking something away from her, but I believe rehoming the cat is the best option for the animal's well-being. So, am I the asshole for giving up my sister's cat without her agreement? Or am I justified since the cat wasn't being cared for properly, and I had my parents' permission? Am I the asshole for refusing to participate in my office's Secret Santa after it got out of hand last year? I, 29F, work in a mid-sized office where we've had a tradition of doing a Secret Santa every holiday season for years. For the most part, it was always a lighthearted event. We had a $20 budget, and people would just exchange simple, thoughtful gifts. The goal was to spread some holiday cheer without it being a financial burden, and I always looked forward to it. That is, until last year when everything changed. The person who was organizing the event that year decided to shake things up. They suggested a theme, luxury gifts only. Immediately, I felt uneasy. I didn't see how it would be feasible or in the spirit of the tradition. But when they raised the budget to $100, I hesitated for a moment. $100 is a significant amount of money, and I was already starting to feel uncomfortable. But since I didn't want to be the odd one out or the office Scrooge, I reluctantly went along with it. I spent a lot of time thinking about what to get the person I had drawn. I decided to play it safe and purchased a $95 gift card to a high-end store, something I knew they'd appreciate, even if it wasn't the most personal gift. I wanted to stay within the theme, but also didn't want to go overboard on something they might not use. When it came time for the gift exchange, I was excited to see what I would receive. However, when I opened my gift, I was honestly shocked. It was a mug and a generic notebook, two items that, together, probably cost about $15 at most. The person who had drawn my name laughed awkwardly and said, "I didn't know what to get, so I just grabbed something random." I smiled and thanked them, but inside, I was fuming. The difference between the effort I put into choosing my gift and what I received felt huge and incredibly unfair. But I didn't want to make a scene, so I just brushed it off. That wasn't even the worst part. As I looked around the room, I realized that many of my coworkers had clearly overspent the $100 limit. Some people received extravagant designer handbags, while others, like me, got almost nothing. Felt like an unspoken competition to see who could outdo each other with the most expensive or over-the-top gift. I couldn't help but feel frustrated, and as the event wrapped up, I felt disillusioned with the entire idea of Secret Santa. Now, here we are, back at holiday season again, and the same person is organizing the event. They've raised the budget once more, to $150. I honestly think it's excessive and unnecessary, especially with the way the economy is right now and the increasing cost of living. I don't want to go through another awkward, uncomfortable experience, so I decided to let the organizer know that I wouldn't be participating this year. The response I got was less than gracious. The organizer was defensive, saying I was killing the holiday spirit by not joining in. A couple of coworkers also weighed in, calling me cheap and antisocial, which only made me feel worse. They said I was being a buzzkill, and that I was ruining the fun for everyone else. But I just couldn't justify spending $150 on something I didn't even feel comfortable with, especially after what happened last year. Now I'm feeling conflicted. I don't want to seem like I'm being difficult, but I also don't think I should have to spend that kind of money to prove I'm a good team player. I would love to enjoy the holiday season and the tradition, but the way things have escalated just doesn't sit well with me. I'm wondering if I'm being unreasonable by opting out, but at the same time, I don't want to feel pressured into spending money I don't have or don't want to spend just to appease others. So, am I the one in the wrong here for refusing to participate this year? Should I just suck it up and join in to avoid conflict? Or is it okay for me to skip it given how things played out last year? Am I the asshole for calling my friend a loser? I, 27F, am Japanese and moved to an English-speaking country, not America, for university. One of my close friends, 29F, is from my university, and we became friends through our shared background and interests. A bit of context. I have a very Japanese-sounding name, and she immediately approached me one day asking if I was Japanese because she loves Japan. At the time, my English wasn't great, and sometimes she'd get frustrated with my language barrier, but we still got along really well and became close friends. At first, I was happy to have someone who shared an interest in my culture, but it started to bother me when I realized that her obsession with Japan wasn't exactly what I expected. She doesn't love Japan per se, she loves anime. She talks like an anime character, does all the exaggerated facial expressions and hand gestures, and wears cosplay in her everyday life. She's a self-proclaimed otaku, but I had to explain to her that in Japan, the term has negative connotations. She stopped using it after I mentioned that, but it didn't change the fact that her view of Japan seemed completely tied to the world of anime. I tried not to judge her too much. Everyone has their interests, right? But over time, it started to feel a little off. Now, a few years later, she has a huge collection of anime merchandise and is planning her first trip to Japan. I was really excited for her when she told me and offered to put together a detailed travel guide for her. I thought it would be helpful, especially since she had no idea about the culture beyond anime. I spent several days putting together this massive document with tips on etiquette, recommendations for food and places to visit, places to avoid, and even emergency contact numbers, including my family's contact info, in case she needed help. My parents had even offered to let her stay with them, so I included their address in the guide as an option. But when I gave her the guide, her reaction crushed me. She rolled her eyes and said it was all boring. She told me she thought I'd give her insider knowledge about anime tours, not stupid gaijin, her words. She also told me she didn't need to know any Japanese because it was a waste of time, and Japanese people are very respectful and will speak English for me. She was convinced that anime Japanese was enough to get by. Despite me explaining that most Japanese people don't speak English very well and that anime Japanese wasn't real Japanese, she refused to listen. She didn't care about any cultural etiquette, saying it didn't matter because tourists were seen all the time and people wouldn't care. Then, when I saw her rough trip outline, I realized it was entirely focused on anime. There was nothing cultural, nothing historical, just anime. I don't know why, but I was so embarrassed. I had put so much effort into helping her, thinking she wanted to understand Japan as a country and its culture. But she seemed to only care about it in the context of anime, reducing an entire country and rich culture to just the things she liked. I snapped. I told her she had no respect for Japan's culture and that she only saw it as an overly sexualized, cute version of what she watches in anime. I called her a loser. I told her she'd be really disappointed when she arrived and realized that everyone would just think of her as an otaku. She was visibly upset and hasn't talked to me since. I feel terrible now because I know I shouldn't have been so harsh, but I had put so much time and effort into helping her, and she completely dismissed it. I just couldn't hold my frustration in anymore. So, am I the asshole for calling my friend a loser? I really feel bad for snapping, but at the same time, I can't shake the feeling that she's being disrespectful toward Japan and its culture. Should I have been more patient with her, or did I have a right to express how I felt? Am I the asshole for telling my husband when he's adding to my mental load? My husband, 33M, and I, 33F, have been married for 7 years, together for 9, and have 2 young kids, a 5-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy. I have ODHD, autistic and ADHD, and, as such, I tend to get overstimulated really easily. Lately, I've been working on minimizing anything that adds to my mental load, especially related to motherhood and the overall management of our household. It's something I've struggled with, and it's been really important for me to communicate my needs to my husband so that I don't get overwhelmed. We've talked about the mental load before, but my husband doesn't seem to fully understand what it entails. He tries, but there are still moments where I feel like he just doesn't get it. So, here's what happened. I was out running some errands and texted him to put some water on for pasta and to chop up some things. When I got home, I started making the pasta, and when it was ready, he took it off the stove for me. The pasta was for him and the 2 kids, while I had different food because I'm celiac, gluten intolerant. He then asked me if he should cool down some of the pasta for the kids since they were getting restless, which I thought was reasonable. I said, "Yes, that's a good idea." Then he asked how much he should set aside for them. I said, "Whatever you think." But then he came back to me with, "So, this much?" I looked at it and said, "A little more than that." But as I was saying this, it hit me that this was exactly the kind of thing that adds to my mental load, and I decided to say something. I told him that questions like that, asking for clarification on how much pasta to set aside for the kids, are exactly the kind of thing I don't want to be responsible for. It's something he should know already, given that we've both known the kids for the same amount of time and generally know how much they eat. He immediately got defensive, saying, "It's just a question, why couldn't you just answer it?" And then sulked on the couch. I tried to apologize, saying that I was just trying to communicate my perspective and that it wasn't about him asking a question, but rather about the cumulative effect of these little things that end up being part of my mental load. He didn't seem to get it and said, "What's the point of me helping out if I can't even ask you anything?" Now, I'm questioning if I went too far in how I approached it. I don't want to make him feel bad for helping, but I also need him to understand how his actions contribute to my mental load. I was trying to communicate this in a way that wasn't accusatory, but it didn't seem to land well. So, am I the asshole for telling my husband that his questions were adding to my mental load? Should I have handled it differently? Am I the asshole for telling my friend her baby daddy is toxic? I, 25M, have a best friend, 26F, who had a baby almost a year and a half ago. The father of her child, her ex, let's call him John, has serious issues with addiction. He's addicted to pills and has a history of becoming unhinged and manic. He's been in and out of her life and hasn't really contributed much to raising their child. He's more focused on drinking and doing drugs than being a parent. Despite all this, my friend continues to allow him to have a role in their child's life. John has been verbally abusive, calling her every name in the book, and even though she's kicked him out and called the cops on him in the past, she still thinks he deserves regular access to their child. It's clear to me that she's stuck in this unhealthy cycle, but she refuses to see it. I've tried to help her see things from a different perspective, but it feels like she's turning a blind eye to his toxic behavior and how it affects her and the baby. A few days ago, I reached my breaking point and texted her, telling her that it's bothersome to watch her continue choosing her toxic ex over her child's well-being. I said that she's valuing her loser sperm donor over her own child, and it really hurt me to see her make decisions that I feel are putting the baby at risk, emotionally and psychologically. My friend didn't take it well. She was upset with me and said that I don't understand and that I shouldn't be judging her. I feel like I was just trying to protect her and the baby from more harm, but I'm starting to question if I overstepped. I know she's in a tough spot, but I don't think I should stand by and watch her continue to enable his behavior. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for texting my best friend and telling her that her baby daddy is toxic and that she's choosing him over her child's well-being? Should I have kept quiet and just let her figure it out herself? My dad treats my cousin like his own daughter, even going so far as to create a college fund just for her. Meanwhile, I give my cousin a gift and hope the bomb goes off when she grows up. There has always been constant conflict in our house regarding my cousin Mary. I'm the youngest daughter of my dad and have 2 older brothers, Brett and Jason, who are twins. The 3 of us have always agreed that our dad loves Mary more and prioritizes her over us. This might sound childish to complain about, but imagine spending your whole life being overshadowed and compared to your cousin, who, honestly, isn't that remarkable to begin with. Mary is a year younger than me and the only child of my uncle and aunt. Naturally, they adore her and shower her with affection, which is completely understandable. What really bothers us is how much our dad pampers Mary. It seems like he loves her more than us, always buying her whatever she wants and giving her more attention. This favoritism has been a sore spot for my brothers and me, making us feel ignored and undervalued since we were little. When I started school, I was in the same grade as Mary despite being a year older. Both my dad and my uncle wanted us to grow up together, so they pushed us to spend time together constantly. Every morning, my dad would wake me up super early to get ready, then drive to my uncle's house to pick up Mary before dropping us both off at school. I never understood why she couldn't just take the bus like other kids. If my dad only had to drop me off, I wouldn't have to wake up so early. Whenever I asked him about this, he would tell me to stop being selfish and to treat Mary like my sister. This only made me more frustrated, as if my feelings didn't matter. At school, Mary would constantly bother me to play with her or spend time with her. Unlike me, she was introverted and didn't have many friends. While I enjoyed spending time with my own friends, this often made Mary unhappy. Every day after school, when my dad came to pick us up, Mary would complain to him if I hadn't spent lunch with her. My dad would then scold me for not including my little sister, as he called her, while I just rolled my eyes and ignored him. It really annoyed me how much favoritism he showed her over his own kids. If you're wondering if my uncle and aunt saw any issue with this, they didn't. My dad and uncle have always been very close, being only a year and a half apart in age. They grew up together, with my uncle teaching my dad how to ride a bike, shave, and change the car oil. Their own dad wasn't really present, so they leaned on each other for support and always had each other's backs. That's why they always pushed for our two families to spend time together. At first, my older brothers told me that Mom didn't like spending so much time with my uncle and aunt, but she didn't have much choice since they visited our house frequently. Whenever she tried to talk to Dad about it, he dismissed her feelings, saying that family should stick together and that he enjoyed spending time with his brother. Mom didn't mind Dad being with his brother, but she felt obligated to socialize because my aunt also came along. Sometimes, people just don't click, and Mom didn't enjoy spending time with my aunt every day. She found her too talkative, overly familiar, and flirtatious with men. This was understandable since my aunt and uncle had an open marriage at the time, meaning they could flirt and sleep with whoever they wanted. My aunt often shared details about her various affairs with my mom, which made her uncomfortable since she didn't believe in such relationships. She also felt it was inappropriate to discuss these things in a house with kids. Whenever my aunt and uncle visited, Mom would send Brett and Jason to play with the neighborhood kids to avoid them overhearing these adult conversations. Dad, on the other hand, had no issues with their open marriage and laughed at their adventurous stories. The year Mom got pregnant with me, my aunt confessed to her that she also wanted to conceive. However, she and my uncle had been struggling with infertility since they got married. After hearing from doctors that they might never have children, they were heartbroken and often argued. Eventually, they decided to stay married but have an open relationship to explore other connections while remaining committed to each other. Despite this, my aunt admitted that she still longed for a child of her own. Mom encouraged her to consider alternatives like adoption or IVF. Although these options were expensive, they were viable paths to building a family. When I was born, Mom experienced complications and tragically passed away due to blood loss. My brothers have told me how traumatic that time was for everyone, grieving Mom's death while celebrating my safe arrival, just as she would have wanted. Dad, however, was inconsolable. He refused to leave her side and sat next to her, unable to process her passing. I can't imagine how much it hurt, but he has never shown resentment or blamed me in any way, even though I wouldn't blame him if he did. I wish Mom were alive. I miss her all the time. Even though I never got to know her, my brothers have so many stories about her, while I only know her through photographs. The first year after my birth was challenging for Dad and my brothers as they adjusted to caring for me. Despite this, Dad took the lead, and my brothers followed his example. These three men have always been there. For me, unconditionally. I don't remember a single day when my brothers fought with me. Growing up, they took me everywhere with them and treated me like their little sidekick. Even when playing video games, they let me sit beside them to watch. They've never argued with me over food and always let me have the biggest slice of pizza if I wanted it. I've always had priority for the bathroom because they understand there are days when I might need it more. I know siblings can be mean and annoying sometimes, but mine are complete sweethearts. They treat me like a princess. While I've heard many stories from friends about siblings fighting, I've never experienced that because my brothers are calm and sensible. The worst we've ever argued about was a movie, and we quickly settled it with a simple vote. Our bond has always been harmonious, and I feel lucky to have such loving brothers. After my mother passed away, my uncle and aunt were always there for us while we were growing up. Fortunately, my aunt became pregnant just a few months after I was born. The news of her pregnancy was a source of joy for everyone in our family, especially considering the long struggle my aunt and uncle had gone through trying to conceive. When Mary was born, she and I spent a lot of time together, as we were only a year apart, and both my dad and uncle wanted us to bond from an early age. At first, I enjoyed spending time with Mary, but when you're forced to spend time with someone every single day, you quickly start to lose interest. When I started school, I made new friends and naturally began spending less time with Mary. However, both my dad and my uncle expected me to always be there for her and look after her. Mary had a tendency to be very whiny and overly dramatic. Growing up as an only child, she never learned to share and was always very possessive of her belongings. Unfortunately, my uncle and aunt never corrected this behavior, and it continued well into her school years. Mary would argue with anyone who tried to borrow her pencil or eraser. Whenever she had a disagreement with a classmate, she would throw a tantrum on the floor. Naturally, kids don't like others who behave that way, so they began excluding her from their games or avoiding her on the playground. When she complained to her parents about it, they blamed the teacher or the other students for not being inclusive, instead of addressing their daughter's flaws. Being forced to spend so much time with Mary made it hard not to lose patience with her. It wasn't easy to get along. If she wanted to watch a specific TV show, I had to watch it, even if I didn't like it. If she wanted to eat at a particular restaurant, I had to agree or she'd throw a fit. If I was invited to a birthday party that she wasn't, my aunt would pressure my dad to convince me to bring Mary along so she could make new friends. This exhausted me, and I often argued with my dad about how draining it was to always accommodate her. Mary also had an annoying habit of showing interest in the boys I liked. If she saw me getting close to a guy, she would approach him and introduce herself as my sister, emphasizing how close we were. Then she'd proceed to tell embarrassing childhood stories about me as if they were funny. When my brothers graduated from high school, they already knew that Dad didn't have enough savings to send them to college. As a result, both of them worked hard to earn partial scholarships, which helped significantly. They also had to take out student loans to complete their education. It was expected that I would follow in their footsteps and hopefully secure a scholarship as well. By the time I was approaching my own high school graduation, I knew I needed to work on my grades and start applying to good universities. During my last 2 years of high school, I cut back on the time I spent with friends and focused more on studying. Mary would often text or call me to hang out, but I ignored her requests. She insisted that people our age needed to have fun and that I was wasting my time in the library. The year I graduated, I received acceptance letters from 2 of my favorite universities and had to choose between them. I was also considering applying to a university the following year that wasn't among my current options. However, one of the universities that accepted me happened to be in the same city as Mary's. Naturally, my family expected me to choose that university. Mary was excited, telling me how she couldn't wait to get an apartment with me so we could attend classes together and have fun. I found it a bit ridiculous. I liked my cousin, but I didn't want to spend my entire college life stuck with her against my will. So, I chose the other university without discussing it with my dad. Since I had a scholarship and was taking out loans in my own name, the decision was essentially mine. When my dad found out, he was furious. He tried to force me to change my decision, but I stood my ground, saying it was my life and my choice. He expressed his disappointment, accusing me of deliberately choosing another university just to avoid spending time with Mary. He tried to convince me that having a sister like Mary was the best thing in life. Frustrated, I told him I already had siblings, my brothers, and I loved spending time with them. I asked him to stop forcing me to spend time with Mary because I was now an adult and needed to make my own decisions. Both my aunt and uncle also expressed their disappointment. They called to tell me how much Mary had looked forward to living with me and how it would have improved her college experience. But I didn't care. I was happy with my choice of university. One day, while I was packing my things into boxes and preparing to move to my dorm, I heard my aunt's car pull up. This wasn't unusual, as she sometimes visited my dad after my brothers moved out, either to spend time with him or to cook for us. Usually, during her visits, I'd leave the house to avoid her. But this time, I was home, so I locked myself in my room and stayed silent, hoping my dad would think I was asleep and not call me to join them. I could hear them talking and laughing downstairs. Curiosity got the better of me, so I cracked open my door and strained to listen. I heard something about a college fund, which immediately caught my attention. I tiptoed downstairs and eavesdropped more closely. I heard my dad telling my aunt that he had been saving money for Mary's college fund for a while now, assuring her that Mary would never have to take out a loan because he had it covered. This revelation stunned me. I stood there, wondering what my dad was talking about. He had never mentioned a college fund for me or my brothers. So why would he create one for my cousin? I felt deeply hurt, questioning why my dad would make financial arrangements for Mary's education without discussing it with me or considering my own financial situation. I tiptoed back upstairs and called my brothers to ask about it. They were just as shocked as I was and asked if I was sure about what I had heard. I assured them I was. The three of us tried to understand Dad's decision, but none of us had any clue. That's when a thought clicked in my mind. I spoke freely with my brothers and asked the question that had been lingering in my heart. Do you think Mary could be Dad's daughter? My brothers were momentarily silent. Then Jason spoke first, initially dismissing the idea as impossible. However, Brett remained quiet for a moment. When Jason urged him to share his thoughts, Brett admitted he had harbored similar suspicions. In the past, there seemed to be no other explanation for why Dad was unusually close to his brother's daughter. Brett pointed out physical similarities between Mary and us, such as our dark brown hair inherited from Dad, which was different from our uncle's blonde hair. Though such resemblances could be purely genetic, we knew there was something about Dad's behavior toward Mary that had always felt puzzling. I made a decision and told my brothers I was going to find out the truth. When they asked how, I said I planned to discreetly obtain a strand of Mary's hair and have a DNA test done. We needed to get to the bottom of this mystery. If she wasn't Dad's daughter, great. There'd be nothing to worry about. But if she was, we needed to know the truth. Brett and Jason reluctantly agreed. I felt guilty as I collected the sample, like I was doing something wrong. But my need to uncover the truth outweighed my discomfort. The anticipation during the week it took to get the DNA results was exhausting. I kept hoping and praying my suspicions were wrong because I had no idea how I'd handle it if Mary turned out to be my sister. Finally, the day came and I received the results. To my shock, they confirmed that Mary was, in fact, my sister. We shared the same biological father. Reading the result felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. I was overwhelmed by a flood of emotions: confusion, disbelief, anger, and sadness, all at once. I couldn't believe Dad had kept such an important secret from us for so long. The revelation that Mary was actually my half-sister, not my cousin, changed everything for me, and I struggled to accept this new reality. I felt betrayed by Dad for hiding this from us and angry at myself for not seeing the signs earlier. Clearly, Dad and my aunt had spent too much time together and probably had an affair. It was disturbing to process the fact that Mary was born just a year after me, meaning Dad had an affair with his brother's wife within a year of my mom's death. The thought disgusted and overwhelmed me. It also explained why Dad had always forced me to spend time with Mary, even when I needed space. I called my brothers in tears, and they immediately noticed. Something was seriously wrong. When I shared the news that Mary was our half-sister, they were too shocked to speak for several minutes. I sent them photos of the DNA test results so they could see for themselves. Brett and Jason were furious and insisted on coming home so we could confront Dad together and get to the bottom of this. But I knew confronting Dad about such a repulsive revelation wouldn't change anything. He had slept with his brother's wife, resulting in Mary's birth. There was nothing we could say to change that truth. Instead, I suggested we cut ties with him. Clearly, Dad hadn't done much for us and had left us to fend for ourselves, taking out student loans to pay for college while he saved money for his affair baby. Brett agreed with me while Jason was still processing the news. After uncovering the secret, I decided we could have a little fun exposing the truth. I devised a plan to reveal the secret to Mary in a subtle but impactful way, ensuring Dad could no longer escape the consequences. I asked my brothers not to tell Dad anything for now and instead to come on the day I was moving to college because I didn't want to leave with Dad. They agreed immediately. On the day of my departure, I invited Mary over to say goodbye. When she arrived, Dad, as always, was overly excited to see her and gave her a warm hug. During my conversation with Mary, she excitedly shared her plans to move into an apartment and mentioned how her mom had recently revealed a secret college fund she had set up for her years ago. I couldn't help but laugh internally and roll my eyes, fully aware of the truth behind it all. Mary was thrilled about how helpful the fund would be for her future and boasted about how her mom had managed to save thousands of dollars, so she wouldn't have to worry about taking out loans like I did. When my brothers arrived to help me pack, they didn't even properly greet Dad. The tension was thick, and my dad must have noticed it too. He tried to approach them, but they ignored him. This was a stark contrast to how we had always been. We had always treated him with respect. However, after discovering his secret, we couldn't look at him the same way. As we finished packing, I turned to say goodbye to my dad. He tried to hug me, but I stepped back awkwardly, avoiding the embrace. He stopped and looked hurt, asking if something was wrong. That's when I looked him in the eye and told him, "I wish Mom were here." He seemed confused and wounded, but I didn't care. After the kind of secret he had kept, I wanted to lash out and scream at him. However, I managed to hold back my anger. Instead, I hugged Mary to say goodbye and handed her an envelope, instructing her to open it in front of my dad after I had left. She nodded, seemingly understanding, and bid me farewell. As I drove away, I felt a swirl of emotions: relief, sadness, and a tinge of guilt. I knew the revelation would throw our family into chaos, but the truth had to come out. Mary needed to know the burden of the secret we now knew about her mother and our dad. As an additional step, I sent a photo of the DNA results to my uncle, ensuring he wouldn't be left in the dark. Within half an hour, my phone was flooded with calls. My brothers received multiple calls too, mostly from my aunt and dad, clearly trying to justify their actions. None of us answered. Eventually, my uncle called, and I decided to pick up because I knew how shocked he must have been after reading the results. He asked directly if the test was fake. It broke my heart to tell him I wished it were. I explained how the news had shattered the image my brothers and I had of our dad when we found out. My uncle took a deep breath and asked if I was okay. His genuine concern broke me, and I started crying. My uncle had always been a significant figure in our lives, and I hated having to be the bearer of such terrible news. Despite his own shock and pain, he comforted me, reassured me that I had done nothing wrong, and thanked me for revealing the truth. Update 1. The aftermath, the fallout from revealing the truth has plunged my family into utter chaos. I've learned that Mary and my uncle moved out of their house quickly after the revelation, wanting nothing to do with my aunt. Meanwhile, my aunt's reaction has been volatile and painful. She bombarded me with a barrage of messages, ranging from abusive accusations to attempts to justify her affair with my dad. In one of her messages, she even blamed me for ruining her marriage and claimed my mother would be ashamed of me for trying to hurt and destroy the family. As for my dad, he has remained completely silent since that day, refusing to acknowledge his wrongdoing. I haven't received a single message or call from him, and honestly, I'm fine with that. There's nothing he could say that would make me forgive him. Although I know deep down that revealing the truth was the right thing to do, the guilt still weighs heavily on me. I never wanted to cause such devastation within my family, but the truth needed to come out eventually, no matter the consequences. Update 2. On apologizing to Mary, many of you suggested I reach out and apologize to Mary, but I've decided not to. To be honest, I will never see Mary as my half-sister. While it's clear that my dad had an affair with her mom, she will always just be my cousin to me. That doesn't mean I harbor any hatred toward her. I don't. I was forced to care for her and play with her growing up, which may have built up some resentment. But I genuinely hope she finds happiness and heals from all of this. Additionally, some of you have mixed opinions about why I cut off my dad and think I should listen to his side of the story. Why would I do that? Imagine your parents slept with their sibling spouse, had a child, and kept it a secret for years while forcing you to befriend your cousin just so they could spend time with that child. Would you be okay with that? Because I can't be. I've thought it over carefully, and I cannot accept such betrayal and deception. Update 3. Closure with my uncle. Recently, my uncle and Mary visited me at college. I was nervous to see them, but as soon as my uncle saw me, he gave me a warm hug, which eased some of my tension. When Mary and I greeted each other, it was polite but awkward. As we sat down to talk, my uncle informed me that he had cut all contact with my dad since the day of the revelation. While it was sad to hear, it wasn't unexpected given the circumstances. He shared that he was filing for divorce from my aunt and asked if she had been in touch with me. I showed him some of the messages she had sent me, which enraged him. He took pictures of the messages and assured me that he and his divorce lawyer would handle it. I was surprised to learn he had already hired a divorce lawyer. My uncle explained that he couldn't stay with her after how she had betrayed him. Mary then asked me how I was doing at university. I told her I was fine. She asked if I knew that the college fund her mother had mentioned was actually set up by my dad for her. I nodded and told her I had overheard the conversation the night her mother came alone to speak with my dad, which had initially raised my suspicions about them. Mary informed me that she had returned the entire fund to my dad and asked him never to contact her again. She said she found his actions deeply disturbing and couldn't accept anyone else as her father. She assured me that she had fully rejected him. My uncle grimaced, clearly still angry, and told me how, on the night he discovered everything, he drove to my dad's house, ready to beat him to death. However, Mary stopped him, and because he loved her so much, he held back. Otherwise, my dad, he said, would be 6 feet under. I understood how frustrating it must have been for him to have raised his little girl for so long, only to discover she wasn't biologically his. What my father had done was the ultimate betrayal between brothers. After my conversation with Mary and my uncle, I felt much better about my decision to cut ties with my dad. As for my siblings and me, we are doing well. The 3 of us are family and will always support each other. We talk regularly and are planning to find jobs in the same city in the future so we can live together. Update 4. Before getting into the actual update, since it's been 3 weeks since I last wrote, I'll address some questions people had about my uncle. I didn't explain his side of the story before, but since I talked about my dad's side, it seems fair to share both. To start, my uncle and aunt had an open relationship, but there were certain rules and none of them allowed my aunt to sleep with someone they both knew, especially my father, because that would have been extremely awkward. For him, it was a double betrayal despite the open marriage, as he never expected something like this. He had thought he'd finally been able to have a daughter, only to find out she had been conceived with his brother. That's my uncle's side of the story. Now, as for my father, he visited Jason. If you remember, Jason had been the least angry, although he wasn't exactly happy with everything either. My father visited him to talk. Before that, he had been writing to all of us, including Brett and me, but I had blocked him. As for Brett, honestly, I don't know what he did. Jason told us everything about our father's visit, which was surprising even to him. He said our father tried to apologize and, to summarize, claimed that it had all been a mistake and that he never planned for it to happen, it just did, blah blah blah. Basically, the usual excuses people make when they get caught in situations like this. He also said he never cheated on our mother and didn't want to hurt us, which is why he never revealed the secret. Lastly, he mentioned the college fund, explaining that he created it in case my uncle found out the truth and decided to disinherit Mary. It was meant to be a safety net for her if something like this happened. But if I'm honest, I don't think what he said is entirely true, or at least not completely. It doesn't explain why he set up a college fund for her and not for us. There's clear favoritism there. I'm also not entirely convinced he didn't cheat on my mother, considering how comfortable he seemed with my uncle and aunt's open marriage. The only two people who could confirm that are my aunt and my dad. I guess that will remain one of those secrets they take to the grave. Regardless, none of this is enough for me to forgive him. Even if everything he said is true, there are still lies and betrayals that have caused immense pain. Jason seems to feel similarly. While he was willing to listen to our father, it's not like he forgave him either. That's all I know for now. Am I the asshole for being frustrated with my autistic nephew? I'm a 30-year-old man with 11 nieces and nephews, and I love them all very much. I've always been the go-to person when it comes to looking after them, whether it's for vacations, weekend trips, or just an afternoon. I'm known to be very patient and capable of handling children with minimal stress. Honestly, I love spending time with them all and rarely find myself overwhelmed. But there's one nephew who really challenges me in ways I never expected. He's almost 2 years old, and though he hasn't been officially diagnosed, he exhibits strong signs of being on the autism spectrum. I have 2 friends who are on the spectrum, and I also have a relative who works with individuals who have neurodivergent traits. All of them have pointed out that my nephew's behavior aligns with what you might expect from a child on the spectrum. He's incredibly sweet and loving at times, but he also presents behaviors that are really hard for me to cope with. When he doesn't get his way, his tantrums are unlike anything I've seen from other kids. He'll scream at the top of his lungs, crying for what feels like hours. And no matter what I do, I can't get him to listen. Discipline doesn't work at all. He'll scream and cry if I try to stop him from doing something dangerous or just something he doesn't want to do. If I try to redirect him or suggest something else, it doesn't help. It's like there's a wall between us, and no amount of reasoning or calming him down can get through. What makes things harder is that his parents, my sister and her husband, seem to be in denial about what's going on. I know they love him, but they act like his behavioral challenges are just typical toddler stuff that he'll grow out of. They're very quick-tempered, loud, and they yell a lot when they're frustrated with him. Sometimes, I can hear the tension between them as they try to manage his behavior, and it clearly takes a toll on their mental health and their relationship. It's heartbreaking to see them struggle, especially when I think that there could be a better way to handle things if they just acknowledged that there might be something more to his behavior. I've had multiple conversations with my sister about the possibility of having him evaluated by a specialist to see if he might be on the spectrum. I've explained to her that getting a diagnosis could help them better understand him and, in turn, help them parent him in a way that supports his needs. But she's terrified of him being officially diagnosed with autism. To her, it feels like a label, like it would somehow define him in a negative way. I've tried to reassure her that getting a diagnosis doesn't mean there's something wrong with him. It just means that there's a way forward, with professionals who can help guide them on how to raise him in a way that meets his unique needs. But she's still not ready to hear it. Instead, she and my brother-in-law continue to raise him as though nothing is different about him. They expect him to snap out of it or just grow up and mature in the way that most toddlers do. I get frustrated because I know that if they accepted the possibility that he might be on the spectrum, they could find ways to approach him that would make his behaviors more manageable and, perhaps even allow him to thrive. It seems like a no-brainer to me, but I can't get them to see it. The hardest part of all this is that I feel guilty for not being able to connect with him the way I connect with my other nieces and nephews. I have this overwhelming sense of exhaustion every time I'm around him. When he has a meltdown, I don't know how to help him calm down, and when his parents are overwhelmed, I just feel powerless to change anything. I try my hardest to connect with him, but no matter what I do, I always feel like there's this invisible barrier. I can't help but feel like I'm avoiding him more than I should, and it makes me feel like a terrible uncle. But it's not just the child's behavior that's exhausting. It's also the fact that his parents don't seem willing to make any effort to understand him. When I talk to family members or other relatives about the situation, I usually get responses like, I agree, but what can you do? Or, he's a toddler, he can't help it, so why are you judging him? And honestly, it leaves me feeling frustrated and alone in my concerns. I just wish they would take the time to truly understand his needs. I know it's hard for them. Parenting is never easy, and I'm sure they're overwhelmed by the constant stress of trying to manage his behavior. But I feel like they could be doing so much more to help him and themselves if they only acknowledged the possibility that there's a reason behind his behavior. They could learn strategies that would make his life easier and reduce the strain on their family dynamic. I love my nephew, and I want what's best for him. I want him to feel understood, and I want his parents to have the tools they need to help him thrive.